Businessman scoffs at quiet father during flight until the pilot calls him by name. Julian Harrison adjusted the knot of his Italian tie while watching with disdain as the other passengers boarded the New York City-Miami flight. At 38, the businessman had built an empire in the real estate sector and made no effort to hide his financial superiority. That was when his eyes locked onto a young man holding the hand of a little girl. The father wore a simple, faded t-shirt, while the child sported a denim jumper with patches and a yellow blouse that had seen better days. "I can't believe I'm going to be traveling with these kinds of people," Julian muttered to himself, shaking his head in disapproval. The man's name was David Bennett. He was 32 years old and was carrying his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, in his arms. He was looking for the seats indicated on the crumpled ticket he kept in the pocket of his worn-out jeans. "Daddy, the plane is so big," Lily whispered, squeezing her father's arm with her little hands. "It sure is, sweetheart. But it'll be a smooth trip, you'll see," David replied in a gentle voice, trying to convey reassurance despite his own anxiety. Julian couldn't take his eyes off the scene. How did those people manage to afford plane tickets? They must have used some social program or last-minute promotion. People like them should be traveling by bus, he thought irritably. The plane began to fill up, and David finally found their seats. To Julian's dismay, they were just 2 rows ahead of him. Even worse, the aircraft was full, meaning he had no way to escape that unwanted proximity. "Excuse me," David said politely to an elderly lady already seated by the window. "Of course, dear." "What a lovely little girl," replied Mrs. Margaret, a 65-year-old woman with neatly combed white hair and a warm smile. Lily shyly hid behind her father, but soon warmed up to the lady's gentle manner. David settled his daughter into the middle seat and sat down by the aisle, placing a plastic grocery bag under the seat. Julian rolled his eyes at the improvised luggage. He himself carried an Italian leather briefcase and an imported brand travel bag. The plane's engines began to roar, and Lily gripped her father's hand tightly. "Daddy, it's so loud," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "It's normal, sweetheart. The plane is just getting ready to fly," David explained, running his hand through the girl's blonde hair. Julian watched the scene with a sarcastic smile. Clearly, it was the first time those two had flown. It would probably also be the last, considering people like them could barely afford their basic bills. The plane started moving down the runway, and Lily held her father's hand even tighter. She looked out the window and saw the city lights rushing by faster and faster. "Daddy, are we flying?" she asked, amazed. "We are, my love. Look down there, how tiny the houses are," David said, pointing out the window. Julian shook his head impatiently. How embarrassing. Adults who had never flown should be ashamed of exposing their ignorance like that in public. After a few minutes in the air, the pilot announced over the intercom that there would be some turbulence due to weather conditions. Almost immediately, the plane began to rock unevenly. Lily let out a frightened squeak and threw herself into her father's arms. "Daddy, are we crashing?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. "No, no, sweetheart. It's just a little wind. The plane is very strong," David said, hugging his daughter and trying to stay calm even though he was equally scared. But Lily started to cry. They weren't silent tears, but loud sobs that echoed through the airplane cabin. Other passengers glanced their way, some with understanding, others with irritation. Julian was one of those who showed his displeasure most clearly. "For heaven's sake," he said loudly, making sure David could hear. "Can't you even control a child? Why bring kids on a plane if you don't know how to raise them?" David felt his face burn with shame, but he stayed focused on calming Lily down. He began to hum a lullaby that always soothed her. "Sleep, sleep, my little treasure. Daddy's right here with you. Nothing's gonna hurt you, my special love." David's soft voice gradually calmed the girl, but Julian wasn't about to let it slide. "Now it's turned into karaoke," he commented loudly, drawing nervous laughter from a few nearby passengers. "Next thing, there'll be a magic show in the aisle." A flight attendant named Natalie approached with a professional smile. "Can I help with anything?" she asked, addressing David. "Yes, you can," Julian interrupted, before David could answer. "You can explain to me how people like this get plane tickets. Shouldn't there be a separate area for that kind of folks?" Natalie looked visibly uncomfortable with the comment, but kept her composure. "Sir, all passengers have the right to travel with comfort and respect," she replied diplomatically. "Comfort?" Julian let out a sarcastic laugh. "Where's my comfort having to put up with this disturbance?" David stayed silent, just holding Lily tight against his chest. The girl had stopped crying, but she was still sobbing softly. "Daddy, why is that man mad at us?" Lily asked quietly, but loud enough for Julian to hear. "He's not mad, sweetie. Some people just express themselves differently," said David, choosing his words carefully. Julian shook his head with disdain. "Express themselves differently," he repeated, imitating David's tone. "What a polite way to put it. I bet you learned that in those free government courses." Mrs. Margaret, who had been observing the whole situation in silence, finally spoke up. "Mister," she said, turning to Julian, "don't you think you've gone too far?" "Too far?" Julian leaned forward. "Ma'am, I pay a lot for this ticket. I have the right to travel without having to put up with noise from a badly behaved child." "The child isn't badly behaved," Mrs. Margaret defended firmly. "She's scared, that's normal." "Normal would be leaving her at home or taking the bus," Julian shot back. "Airplanes aren't for poor people who've never traveled in their lives." David clenched his fists, feeling anger rise in his chest, but he took a deep breath. He couldn't make a scene in front of Lily. He couldn't give Julian the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. "Daddy, are you okay?" Lily asked, noticing her father's tension. "I'm fine, my love. How about we play counting the clouds out there?" David suggested, trying to distract his daughter and calm himself down. Julian rolled his eyes one more time. "Counting clouds. How pathetic," he muttered, but loud enough to be heard. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The turbulence gradually lessened and the plane stabilized. Lily, distracted by the game her father had proposed, began to perk up again. "Daddy, that cloud over there looks like a puppy," she said, pointing out the window. "It sure does," David agreed, smiling for the first time since the flight began. "And that other one looks like a giant ice cream." "Strawberry ice cream," Lily exclaimed, clapping her hands. Julian shook his head in irritation. How can they be so simple-minded? Childish games in the middle of a flight. He himself was focused on reviewing important contracts on his tablet when he was interrupted by the child's naive comments. "Daddy, when we get there, will Grandma be waiting?" asked Lily. "Yes, she will, my love. She's very excited to see you," replied David, his eyes filling with tears that he quickly blinked away. Julian noticed the emotion in David's voice, and it irritated him even more. Cheap sentimentality. They were probably going to visit some relative in the countryside, spending their meager savings on an unnecessary trip when they should be investing in education or saving for the future. "Dad, I'm thirsty," said Lily after a few minutes. David searched the plastic bag, but realized he had forgotten to bring water. His face turned red with embarrassment. "Dad forgot to bring water, sweetheart. I'll ask the lady on the plane," he said, raising his hand to call a flight attendant. "See?" commented Julian loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Can't even get water for his daughter. What kind of father is that?" The words hit David like a punch to the stomach. He felt small, humiliated. It was true. He had forgotten such a basic detail. What kind of father was he, really? Natalie approached again. "Yes, sir. My daughter is thirsty. Is there any way to get a glass of water?" David asked politely. "Of course, no problem at all," Natalie replied with a gentle smile. "You see," continued Julian, not missing the opportunity, "you should have been better prepared before traveling. Bringing water is the bare minimum." David lowered his head, feeling the eyes of other passengers on him. Lily noticed her father's embarrassment and held his hand. "It's okay, Daddy. You're the best dad in the world," she said with the innocence of her age. Julian let out a cruel laugh. "The best dad in the world?" he repeated. "A dad who can't even bring water for his daughter." Natalie quickly returned with a glass of water and some cookies. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said to Lily. "And I brought some cookies too." "Thank you very much, ma'am," David said, his eyes welling up with gratitude. "Don't mention it, sir. Just call if you need anything else," Natalie replied, shooting a disapproving look in Julian's direction. Lily drank the water happily and offered a cookie to Mrs. Margaret. "Want one, Grandma?" she asked innocently. "Thank you, dear. You're an angel," Mrs. Margaret said, accepting the cookie and stroking the girl's face. Julian watched the scene with disdain. "This is why poor people stay poor," he commented. "Always sharing the little they have. They'll never get ahead with that mindset." Mrs. Margaret turned to Julian, her eyes flashing with anger. "You have crossed every line," she said firmly. "This child is being raised with the most beautiful values there are, generosity and kindness, something you clearly know nothing about." "Beautiful values?" Julian laughed sarcastically. "Ma'am, in the real world, if you don't look out for yourself, you get left behind. That naivety only keeps people stuck in poverty." An elderly passenger a few rows back stood up and approached. "Excuse me," he said, "a man in his 70s with white hair and an elegant posture. Can I switch seats with someone here? I can't get any rest with all this noise." Julian smiled, thinking that finally someone had agreed with him about the disruption David and Lily were causing. "Of course, sir, I completely understand," Julian said. "I'm annoyed by the situation too." But the elderly man looked directly at Julian. "Actually, young man, the noise that's bothering me is your spiteful comments. This father and child are being exemplary. The problem here is your lack of manners." Julian turned red with anger. "Excuse me? What's that supposed to mean?" "You heard me perfectly well," said the elderly man, whose name was Dr. Arthur. "I've witnessed many situations in my 70 years of life, and I can assure you that your behavior is the most embarrassing I've ever seen on an airplane." Julian was about to respond when the pilot made another announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Unfortunately, we'll need to make an unscheduled technical stop at New Orleans International Airport due to adverse weather conditions at our destination. I apologize for the inconvenience." Julian exploded with rage. "Damn it! I have a very important commitment in Miami," he shouted, slamming his fist on the armrest. "Daddy, why are you shouting?" asked Lily, frightened. "He's nervous because the plane is stopping somewhere else first," David explained patiently. "But why is he nervous? We can also take a walk," said Lily with the simple logic of a child. Julian looked at the girl with irritation. "Take a walk? This isn't a game, kid. I have serious business to handle, millions of dollars worth of business." "Millions?" asked Lily, impressed. "Is that a lot of money?" "It's more money than you and your father will ever see in your entire lives," Julian replied cruelly. David felt a lump in his throat but kept his composure. "Lily, each person has their own life and challenges," he said gently. "The important thing is to be happy with what we have." "That's true, Daddy. We are happy," Lily agreed, hugging her father. Julian shook his head with disdain. What a pathetic speech about being happy with little, pure conformity. That was the kind of mindset that kept people in mediocrity. The plane began its descent into New Orleans, and some passengers grew restless, worried about their commitments. Julian was among the most irritated, speaking loudly on his cell phone despite the crew's warnings to keep devices turned off. "Yes, Derek, I know the contract has a deadline," he shouted into the phone. "It's not my fault if this lousy plane has issues." "Sir, I need you to turn off your cell phone during landing," Natalie asked politely. "I'm talking about millions in business," Julian snapped back. "That's more important than your little rules." "Sir, these are safety regulations," Natalie insisted. Julian hung up the phone angrily, grumbling about the incompetence of everyone around him. During the landing, Lily was enchanted, seeing the city of New Orleans below. "Daddy, what a beautiful place," she exclaimed. "It's New Orleans, sweetheart, a very important city for the country," David explained. "Can I visit it one day?" Lily asked. "Maybe, sweetie." "Maybe," David replied, knowing that trips were a luxury he couldn't provide for his daughter. Julian overheard the conversation and rolled his eyes. Impossible dreams. It was better for the child to learn early about the limitations of her social class. At New Orleans International Airport, the passengers were directed to a waiting area. Julian immediately found a secluded corner and resumed talking on the phone, gesturing nervously. David and Lily sat near a snack bar, but he checked the prices and realized they were beyond his budget. He had brought only a few homemade sandwiches for the trip. "Daddy, can I eat something?" Lily asked, looking with interest at the snacks on display. David opened the bag and took out a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil. "I brought your favorite, sweetheart." "Ham and cheese sandwich," he said, trying to sound cheerful. Julian watched the scene from a distance and shook his head with disdain. A homemade sandwich in aluminum foil wrapping. How embarrassing. He himself had bought an executive combo at the snack bar for $40 without thinking twice. Lily shared the sandwich with Mrs. Margaret, who was sitting next to them. "Thank you, dear, but you don't need to," said Mrs. Margaret. "My daddy always says sharing makes food taste better," replied Lily with a smile. Julian happened to walk past them just then and overheard the comment. "Sharing makes food taste better," he repeated sarcastically. "What a profound philosophy. I bet you learned that from some government pamphlet." Dr. Arthur, who was reading a newspaper nearby, looked up. "Young man, don't you ever get tired of being unpleasant?" he asked. "Unpleasant?" Julian stepped closer. "I'm being realistic. These people live on illusions and complacency. Someone has to speak the truth." "The truth?" Dr. Arthur folded his newspaper. "The truth is that this child is learning values you clearly don't possess." "Values?" Julian laughed. "Doctor, I built an empire from scratch. I own 5 companies and close million-dollar deals. Talk to me about values." "Building wealth and building character are 2 completely different things," Dr. Arthur replied calmly. Julian was about to retort when he heard a strange noise. Lily had dropped her little toy, a small yellow plastic horse, which rolled over to near Julian's feet. The girl timidly stood up and approached. "Excuse me, sir, my little horse fell over here," she said politely. Julian looked at the old worn-out toy with disgust. Instead of handing it over, he kicked it away, sending the little horse rolling under some chairs. "Learn to take better care of your things," he said coldly. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but David quickly stood up. "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy will get it for you," he said, walking calmly to where the toy was. Other passengers watched the scene with indignation. Some shook their heads, others murmured disapproving comments. David picked up the little horse, brushed off the dust, and handed it to Lily. "Here you go, honey," he said with a forced smile. Then he turned to Julian. "Thank you anyway," David said, surprising everyone with his kindness. Julian was momentarily speechless. How could someone say thank you after being humiliated like that? "Daddy, why did you say thank you?" Lily asked, confused. "Because we should always be polite, my love. Even when people aren't polite to us," David explained, his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Arthur slowly stood up and walked over to David. "Allow me to shake your hand," he said, extending his hand. "It's rare to see so much class and good manners these days." David shook the elderly man's hand, embarrassed by the compliment. "Don't mention it, Doctor. I'm just trying to set the right example for my daughter." "And you're doing it magnificently," replied Dr. Arthur, shooting a meaningful look toward Julian. Julian walked away, feeling uncomfortable with the general disapproval. He went back to talking on the phone, trying to seem busy and important. "Derek, you need to speed everything up," he shouted. "This delay could cost the company millions." An hour later, the flight was cleared to continue. The passengers boarded the same plane again, but this time Julian noticed that several people warmly greeted David and Lily. A new flight attendant came aboard to replace Natalie during the second leg. As soon as she saw David, her face lit up with a genuine smile. "Hi, David. What a surprise to find you here," she said, stepping forward to give him a hug. Julian was intrigued. How did that simple man know a flight attendant? Probably some acquaintance from the poor neighborhood where he lived. "Hi, Brooke," David replied, looking genuinely happy to see her. "How are you?" "Good. Working hard." "And this must be Lily, the one you always talk about so fondly," said Brooke, bending down to the girl's level. "Hi," Lily replied shyly, hiding behind her father. Julian watched the interaction with growing irritation. Now even the flight attendants had their poor favorites. So unprofessional. "It's so nice to talk to you after all this time," continued Brooke. "I'll make sure to take good care of you during the flight." "No need, Brooke. "We don't want any special treatment," said David humbly. "Oh, it's not special treatment. It's the least I can do," she replied, winking at Lily. Julian shook his head in disdain. Blatant favoritism. David had probably done some small favor for her family, and now she felt obligated to repay it. The plane took off again, and this time the trip went smoothly without turbulence. Lily was calmer and started chatting animatedly with Mrs. Margaret about cartoons. "My favorite is the one with the little dog who saves everyone," she said. "Oh, I know that one," replied Mrs. Margaret. "My granddaughter loves it too." Julian tried to focus on his documents, but their lively conversation annoyed him. How could they be so simple? Talking about cartoons as if it were the most important thing in the world. After a few hours of flight, the pilot made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Miami International Airport. Estimated arrival time, 20 minutes. Lily clapped her hands in joy. "Daddy, we're almost there. Is Grandma waiting?" "Yes, sweetheart, she should be at the airport already," replied David, but Julian noticed a deep sadness in his eyes. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" asked Lily, noticing the same thing. "I'm not sad, sweetheart, I'm just emotional," said David, running his hand through the girl's hair. Julian rolled his eyes. So theatrical. They were probably heading to some funeral or dramatic situation like that. Poor people always had family dramas. When the plane landed in Miami, the passengers began to prepare to disembark. Julian was eager to leave and chase after his lost business deals. Then something unexpected happened. The pilot came out of the cockpit and walked through the cabin until he reached where David was sitting. Julian stopped packing his documents to watch, curious. "Excuse me, everyone," said the pilot, addressing the nearby passengers. "I need to talk to my brother." Julian went cold. "Brother?" The pilot, who wore a name tag reading Captain Christopher Bennett, bent down and hugged David tightly. "Dave, it's so good to see you," said Christopher, emotional. "Christopher." David tried to speak, but emotion got in the way. Julian felt the ground disappear from under his feet. The poor father was the pilot's brother. That didn't make sense. Lily jumped into her uncle's lap. "Uncle Christopher, I flew on your plane," she shouted, excited. "Yes, you did, my princess," said Christopher, kissing his niece's cheek. "Dad said you were very brave." Julian watched the scene, unable to fully process what was happening. There was something very wrong with his assumptions. Christopher turned to the other passengers, some of whom were watching the family scene with smiles. "Everyone, I apologize for taking your time, but I need to take advantage of my brother being here," he said. "We haven't seen each other in months because of our work schedules." "No problem, Captain," said Dr. Arthur. "Family moments are sacred." Julian kept watching, trying to understand. If David was the pilot's brother, why was he traveling that way? Why did he seem so simple? Christopher took David's hand and spoke to the nearby passengers. "My brother here is a very special person. He gave up a lot to take care of Lily after our sister-in-law passed away." The atmosphere in the cabin changed completely. Other passengers moved closer to hear better. "Passed away?" asked Mrs. Margaret, moved. 2 years ago, Christopher confirmed. "Natalie, David's wife, had complications during the birth of their second child. We lost both of them the same day." Julian felt a chill run down his spine. David had lost his wife and another child. That would explain the sadness he had noticed in the man's eyes. "Since then, this guy here," Christopher placed his hand on David's shoulder, "has devoted himself entirely to Lily. He left a brilliant career to be a full-time father." "Brilliant career?" asked Dr. Arthur Sterling, interested. "David is a neurosurgeon," Christopher said with pride. "One of the best I've ever known." Julian's world came crashing down completely. A neurosurgeon? The man he had humiliated was a doctor, and not just any doctor, but a neurosurgeon. "Uncle Christopher, don't say those things," David said, clearly embarrassed. "Why not, Dave?" Christopher asked. "You saved hundreds of lives. You should be proud of that." Brooke, the flight attendant, approached the group. "Can I say something too?" she asked timidly. Christopher nodded. "David operated on my mother for free 3 years ago," Brooke said, emotional. "She had a brain tumor and no health insurance. He not only operated for free, but also followed up on the entire treatment." Julian felt smaller and smaller in his seat. Each word was like a punch to his stomach. "What do you mean, operated for free?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "David always did that," Christopher explained. "He treated needy patients without charging. That's why he never saved much money, despite being an excellent doctor." "And now?" asked Dr. Arthur. "Does he still practice medicine?" Christopher shook his head. After losing Natalie, he decided to stop operating. He said he couldn't concentrate on surgeries anymore, thinking he might leave Lily orphaned too. David lowered his head, clearly emotional from the conversation. "Christopher, please," he murmured. "Sorry, bro, I'm just really proud of you," Christopher said. Even though he stopped doing surgeries, he still gives consultations at a health clinic in the countryside. He earns little, but he can help people and stay close to Lily. Julian felt completely destroyed. Everything he had thought about David was wrong. Completely wrong. "Is that why you're traveling today?" asked Dr. Arthur. Christopher took a deep breath before answering. "Our mother is hospitalized here in Miami. In serious condition," he said, emotional. "David didn't have the money for the ticket, so my wife and I pooled our money to buy tickets for him and Lily." "What do you mean he didn't have the money?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "Being a doctor, he donated practically all his savings to a family that needed to fund treatment for their son," Christopher explained. "The boy was the same age as Lily, and David couldn't say no." Tears began to roll down Julian's face. He had humiliated a hero, a man who had sacrificed everything for others. "Uncle Christopher, is Grandma going to be okay?" Lily asked, worried. "Let's hope so, Princess," Christopher replied, kissing his niece's forehead. Dr. Arthur approached David. "Young man, allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Arthur Sterling, Director of Prestige Medical Center." Julian recognized the name immediately. Dr. Arthur was a legend in American medicine. "Doctor, it's an honor," David said, shaking the elderly man's hand. "The honor is mine. Christopher, your brother operated on my partner's wife a few years ago. He always talks about the angel in a white coat who saved her life," Dr. Arthur said. Julian wanted to disappear. Each revelation was worse than the last. "Can I take this opportunity to make an invitation?" Dr. Arthur continued. "We need neurosurgeons in New York City. If you decide to return to practice—" "Thank you, Doctor, but I can't leave Lily," replied David. "Who said anything about leaving?" Dr. Arthur smiled. "We have excellent schools and daycare centers at the hospital. She'd be right close to her dad." Julian watched everything, unable to utter a word. His throat was tight with shame and remorse. Mrs. Margaret approached David with tears in her eyes. "My boy, I need to tell you something," she said, emotional. "Of course, Mrs. Margaret. You saved my grandson's life 5 years ago. He fell off his bike and had a head injury. You operated on him at University Medical Center," she said, crying. David's eyes widened in surprise. "The boy with the blue bike?" "That's the one," exclaimed Mrs. Margaret. "Tommy, he's 15 now, and plays soccer thanks to you." Julian watched it all as if in a nightmare. Every person on the plane seemed to have a story with David, and he had humiliated this man for hours. "Mrs. Margaret, it's such a joy to know he's doing well," said David, genuinely moved. "When I found out you had stopped operating, I was very sad," Mrs. Margaret continued. "A doctor like you is a gift from God to the world." Brooke came closer again. "David, can I tell everyone about your other good deed?" David shook his head, embarrassed. "No need, Brooke." "Yes, there is," she insisted. "This man donated a kidney to save the life of a child he didn't even know." Silence fell over the cabin. Julian felt like he might faint. "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Arthur. 3 years ago, a cleaning lady at the hospital where he worked was desperate because her son needed a transplant, Brooke explained. David offered to be the donor. "My God," murmured Mrs. Margaret. "He had surgery with only local anesthesia so he could go back to work the next day," Brooke continued. "He didn't want anyone to know." Julian started crying silently. It wasn't possible that he had humiliated such a good person. Christopher hugged his brother tightly. "That's why I'm so proud of you, bro. You're the best human being I know." "Christopher, stop it," David begged, clearly embarrassed. "I'm not stopping," said Christopher, turning to the other passengers. "Do you know how many lives my brother has saved? More than 500. 500 families owe their lives to this man." Julian couldn't hold back his tears anymore. He got up from his seat and walked over to David, trembling. "Sir, Doctor, He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. David looked at Julian with understanding in his eyes. "You don't need to say anything," David said softly. "Yes, I do," Julian insisted, his voice breaking. "I was a monster to you, to all of you." "No, you weren't," said Lily, innocently. "You were just nervous." The child's innocence broke Julian completely. He collapsed into tears. "How can you be so good?" he asked, sobbing. "How can you forgive me after what I did?" David stood up and placed his hand on Julian's shoulder. "Everyone goes through tough times," he said. "Everyone deserves understanding." "But I don't deserve it," said Julian. "I judged you by your clothes, your money. I'm an empty man." "You're not empty," David said firmly. "You just lost your way. It happens to a lot of people." Dr. Arthur approached the two of them. "Young man," he said to Julian, "recognizing our mistakes is the first step to improving." Julian wiped his tears and looked at everyone around him. "I built a fortune thinking it made me better than others, but you've shown me that I have none of what really matters." "Money isn't bad," said David. "The problem is when it becomes the only thing that matters." "Dr. David, may I ask you something?" said Julian, trying to compose himself. "Of course. Why didn't you answer me when I was rude? Why didn't you put me in my place?" David looked at Lily before answering. "Because I didn't want to set a bad example for my daughter. Violence breeds violence, rudeness breeds rudeness. I prefer to teach through love." Julian shook his head, amazed. "You're truly a special man." "He really is," agreed Christopher. "That's why our whole family is so proud of him. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, moving on." Julian took a deep breath and made a decision. "Dr. David, I'd like to ask a question about your mother," he said. "Go ahead," replied David, curious. "Is she admitted to a private or public hospital?" "Public," answered David. "It's what we can manage." Julian pulled out his phone. "Can I make a call?" David nodded, intrigued. Julian dialed a number and waited for an answer. "Hello, Dr. Gibson? It's Julian Harrison. Yes, everything's fine. Look, I need an urgent favor. I have a patient who needs to be transferred to your hospital right now. It's all on me. Yes, I want the best room, the best team." David tried to interrupt. "Julian, you don't have to—" Julian made a gesture asking him to wait. "Dr. Gibson, the patient's name is—" He looked at David. "What's your mother's name?" "Catherine Bennett," replied David, emotional. "Catherine Bennett. She's admitted to City General Hospital here in Miami. Yes, I want an immediate transfer. And Dr. Gibson, put your best team on the case. Money is no object." Julian hung up the phone and turned to David. "Your mother will receive the best treatment available in the country," he said. "It's the least I can do." David was speechless. Christopher was also emotional. "Julian, that must cost a fortune," said David. "Doctor, you saved 500 lives. I have to try to save at least one," replied Julian. Lily approached Julian and tugged at the hem of his pants. "Sir, thank you so much for helping Grandma," she said, with an angelic smile. Julian knelt down to her level. "Lily, can I tell you a secret?" She nodded. "You have the most amazing dad in the world," said Julian. "And I learned today that being truly rich means having a family that loves you." "Don't you have a family?" asked Lily, concerned. Julian took a deep breath. "I have an ex-wife who left me because I only thought about work, and I have a 10-year-old son who barely knows me because I never had time for him." "But there's still time to get to know him," said David. "It's never too late to change." "Do you think so?" asked Julian. "I'm sure. If I could have one more day with my wife, I'd do everything differently. You still have the chance I don't." Julian felt a tightness in his chest as he sensed the pain David carried. "Doctor, how can you be so strong?" "I'm not strong," said David, hugging Lily. "I have motivation. She's my reason for living." Dr. Arthur approached again. "David, can I make a proposal?" "Of course, Doctor." "How about you and Lily spend a few days in New York City after your mother recovers? You could stay at my house. My wife would love to meet you two." "Doctor, that's very kind, but—" "No buts," interrupted Dr. Arthur. "And Julian, you're invited too. I think you two have a lot to talk about." Julian looked at David, hopeful. "Dr. David, would you accept my friendship? I know I don't deserve it, but—" "Julian, everyone deserves a second chance," said David, extending his hand. "Including you." The two men shook hands, sealing the start of an unlikely friendship. The plane had finished disembarking, but no one seemed in a hurry to leave. The atmosphere was charged with emotion and hope. "Everyone," said Christopher, "I need to thank you all. My brother has been through some very tough times in recent years. Seeing him receive so much affection and recognition deeply moves me." "Captain," said Dr. Arthur, "your brother is an example to us all. I've met many doctors in my life, but few with as much heart." "That's true," agreed Mrs. Margaret. "He should go back to operating. The world needs more doctors like him." David shook his head. "I don't know if I have the courage for that anymore," he admitted. "Holding a life in my hands, knowing I could leave Lily an orphan if something goes wrong." "Daddy," said Lily, tugging at her father's shirt, "you always told me helping people is the most important thing." "It is, my love. Then you have to go back to helping." "Then you—" "I'll give you luck so you don't get hurt," she said with the simple logic of a child. David smiled and kissed his daughter's forehead. "Does it work?" "It does. I'll pray every day," Lily promised. Julian watched the interaction between father and daughter with a heavy heart. When was the last time he had a conversation like that with his own son? "Dr. David," said Julian, "can I make one more phone call?" "Of course." Julian dialed another number. "Hello, Cynthia. It's Julian. I know we're separated, but I need to talk to you about Leo." "No, it's not a problem. It's just that I want to change his school. To a better school, with more time for him. And Cynthia, I'd like to spend more time with our son. Yes, I know you've always said that. You were right and I was wrong. Can I pick him up tomorrow so we can spend the weekend together?" Julian hung up with a smile on his face. "I'm going to really get to know my son," he announced. "That's great," exclaimed Lily. "Kids really love their dads." "How do you know?" asked Julian, smiling. "Because I love my daddy a lot, so all kids must love theirs too," she replied simply. Julian was moved again by the girl's purity. "David, your daughter is an angel." "She's my light," agreed David. "Everything I do is for her." "That's why you're such an amazing father," said Julian. "I never thought about Leo that way. I always put work first." "It's never too late to change," repeated David. Dr. Arthur looked at his watch. "Folks, I think we should get going. You have a mother waiting at the hospital," he said to David and Christopher. "True," agreed Christopher. "Dave, shall we?" David nodded and began gathering his things. Julian approached him. "Doctor, may I ask one more favor?" "Of course." "Can you give me your phone number? I'd like to follow up on your mother's recovery, and if you need anything." David wrote the number on a piece of paper and handed it to Julian. "Thank you for everything, Julian. You all turned a sad day into a special one." "We're the ones who should be thanking you," said Mrs. Margaret. "Meeting people like you restores our faith in humanity." Everyone started making their way to the exit of the plane. Julian walked beside David and Lily. "Doctor, may I ask one last thing?" "Go ahead." "How do you manage to keep your faith after everything you've been through?" David paused for a moment and looked at Lily, who was walking ahead, chatting animatedly with Mrs. Margaret. "Julian, when you lose someone you love, you have two choices. You can let the pain destroy you, or you can turn that pain into love for those who are still here." "I chose to love more." "Love more?" "Yes. I love Lily more. I love my patients more. I love life more, because I know it can all end at any moment." Julian reflected on those words. "I've always been afraid to love," he admitted. "I thought showing feelings was a sign of weakness." "Love is the greatest force there is," said David. It was my love for Natalie that taught me to be a better doctor. It's my love for Lily that makes me want to be a better father every day. And now, with your mother sick, now it's my love for her that will give me the strength to face whatever comes." Julian paused, walking for a moment. "David. Can I call you David?" "Of course. I want to learn to love like you. I want to be a better father, a better man." David smiled and placed his hand on Julian's shoulder. "You've already started, Julian. Recognizing you need to change is the first step." "Is it too late?" "It's never too late to start doing the right thing." The two men walked together toward the exit, followed by the other passengers who had witnessed that extraordinary transformation. At the airport terminal, an elegant woman in her 60s waited anxiously. It was Claire, Christopher's wife and David's sister-in-law. "Christopher!" she shouted, running to hug her husband. "Hey, honey," said Christopher, returning the hug. "How's Mom?" "Better. The doctors are optimistic," replied Claire. "And this must be the famous David." She hugged David warmly. "Claire, so nice to finally meet you in person," said David. "And this princess must be Lily," said Claire, crouching down to greet the girl. "Hi, Aunt Claire," Lily replied shyly. Julian watched from a distance, not wanting to intrude on the family moment, but David called him over. "Julian, come meet my sister-in-law." "Oh, you're the Julian who handled Mrs. Catherine's transfer?" asked Claire. "What do you mean?" David said in surprise. "She's already at the private hospital, honey. She arrived an hour ago," Claire explained. David turned to Julian with tears in his eyes. "How did you manage to speed things up so much?" "I have a few contacts," Julian said modestly. "And when it's to save the mother of a hero, everyone moves quickly." Claire grew curious. "A hero?" Christopher hugged David. "Claire, I told you my brother is special, but I didn't know how much. Today I found out things about him even I didn't know." "Like what?" "He donated a kidney to save the life of a stranger's child," said Dr. Arthur Sterling, who had approached the group. Claire's jaw dropped. "David, is that true?" "Aunt Claire, my daddy is a real hero," Lily said proudly. Claire began to cry with emotion. "My God, David, you're truly special." "Enough, everyone," David asked, embarrassed. "Shall we go see Mom?" "Let's go," Christopher agreed. "Julian, will you come with us?" Julian hesitated. "I don't know if that would be appropriate." "Of course it would," David insisted. "You're the reason she's getting the best treatment. My mother would like to meet you." The group headed toward the cars waiting for them. Dr. Arthur Sterling said goodbye, promising to get in touch soon. "David, don't forget about the job offer," he said. "I won't forget, Doctor. Thank you for everything." Mrs. Margaret also said goodbye, but before that she kissed Lily on the forehead. "Sweetheart, you have a wonderful daddy. Never forget that." "I know, Grandma Margaret. He's the best daddy in the world," Lily replied. During the drive to the hospital, Julian stayed quiet, reflecting on everything that had happened. David noticed his contemplative state. "Julian, what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about what a horrible person I was this morning, and how you all changed my life in just a few hours." "You weren't horrible. You were lost," David corrected. "How can you be sure?" "Because a truly bad person wouldn't care about the pain they caused. You cared. That shows your heart is good." Lily, who was sitting between them, held Julian's hand. "Mr. Julian, will you be our friend forever?" Julian gently squeezed her little hand. "If you'll let me, Lily, I'd very much like to be your friend." "I'll allow it," she said, smiling. "And so will I," added David. At the hospital, they were greeted by Dr. Gibson, one of the best cardiologists in the country. "Julian, great to see you," said Dr. Gibson. "And these must be Mrs. Catherine's children." "Actually, it's her son and granddaughter," corrected Christopher. "Ah, right. Mrs. Catherine can't stop talking about her son, the doctor. She's very proud." David was moved. "How is she, doctor?" "Much better. The surgery was a success. She should be discharged in a week." "Surgery?" David asked, startled. "What surgery?" "The bypass she needed 2 years ago but couldn't afford," explained Dr. Gibson. David looked at Julian, perplexed. "Julian, How much did that cost? Julian waved dismissively. David, you saved 500 lives. I'm just trying to save one. Christopher hugged Julian. Man, I don't have words to thank you. Christopher, I'm the one who needs to thank you. You showed me what really matters in life. Doctor, Gibson led them to the room where Mrs. Catherine was. She was a 72-year-old woman with white hair and a sweet smile that reminded David of himself. My son, she exclaimed when she saw David. Mom, said David, emotional, approaching the bed. And my beautiful granddaughter, said Mrs. Catherine, reaching out her arms for Lily. Grandma, are you feeling better? Asked Lily, climbing onto the bed to hug her grandmother. I am, my love. The doctors here are very good. Mrs. Catherine looked around the luxurious room and then at David. Son, how did you manage to pay for all this? David looked at Julian. Mom, this is Julian. He's our guardian angel. Mrs. Catherine looked at Julian with curiosity. Pleased to meet you, ma'am, said Julian, approaching respectfully. Young man, you're too young to be an angel, joked Mrs. Catherine, but thank you so much for taking care of us. You don't need to thank me. It's a privilege to be able to help Dr. David's family. Dr. David? Mrs. Catherine smiled. It's been a long time since anyone called him that. Mom, stop, David pleaded, embarrassed. Why stop? Asked Mrs. Catherine. You're a doctor, son, a wonderful doctor. Julian approached the bed. Mrs. Catherine, can I tell you what I discovered about your son today? Sure. He's the most incredible person I've ever met. He saved hundreds of lives, donated a kidney to a child, performed surgeries for free. I know all that, interrupted Mrs. Catherine, her eyes shining with pride. My David was always special. Since he was little, he wanted to help everyone. Even when he had nothing, he gave what little he had, continued Mrs. Catherine. I remember when he was 8 years old and gave his winter coat to a boy who was cold at school. David lowered his head, moved by the childhood memories. And when he started making money as a doctor, he never forgot where he came from, said Mrs. Catherine. He always helped those in need. Mom, that's in the past, said David. It's not in the past, son. It's who you are, and it always will be. Julian was listening intently. Mrs. Catherine, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. How did you manage to raise such a special son? Mrs. Catherine smiled and took David's hand. I didn't do anything special. I just taught what my mother taught me, that we're only happy when we make others happy. Is it that simple? Yes, it is. Money comes and goes. Beauty fades. But the good we do lasts forever. Julian reflected on those words. You're right. It took me a long time to understand that. It's never too late to learn, said Mrs. Catherine with wisdom. Lily, who was playing with her grandmother, suddenly asked, Grandma, why doesn't Daddy perform surgeries on people anymore? Mrs. Catherine looked at David with sadness. Because he's afraid, my love. Afraid of what? Afraid of leaving you alone, her grandmother explained. Lily thought for a moment. Jice, but Grandma, if Daddy doesn't help people, they might get sad like we did when Mummy went to heaven. Silence filled the room. David had tears in his eyes. Sweetheart, it's complicated. No, it's not, Daddy, said Lily, with the innocent wisdom of children. Mummy always said you saved lives. If you stop, who will save them? David couldn't answer. Mrs. Catherine squeezed his hand. Son, your wife was so proud of you. She wouldn't want to see you stop. Christopher, who had been silent until then, stepped closer. Bro, Lily is right. Natalie always said your gift was from God. But what if something happens to me? Asked David, distressed. And what if nothing happens? Countered Mrs. Catherine. Son, life is risky, but not living because of fear is much worse. Julian, who had followed the whole conversation, approached. David, can I share something with you? Sure. I spent my whole life afraid. Afraid of losing money, afraid of showing feelings, afraid of not being good enough. You know where that fear got me. Where? Into loneliness. I lost my family, lost friends, lost the joy of living. Today, meeting you, I realize the biggest risk isn't dying. It's living without purpose. David looked at Julian, then at his mother, at Lily, at Christopher. You really think I should go back? Daddy, said Lily, climbing onto her father's lap. You taught me that helping people makes us happy. You're not happy because you stopped helping." David hugged his daughter, moved. "How did you get so wise?" "I learned from you," she replied, kissing her father's face. Mrs. Catherine smiled. "David, your daughter is right. You need to go back to doing what you love." "But I'm scared." "Everyone is scared, son. The difference is that the brave do it despite the fear." Julian approached again. "David, you gave me the courage to change my life today. Let me repay you by giving you the courage to change yours." "How?" "If you decide to go back to surgery, I'll make sure to cover the cost of the best nanny for Lily. She'll always be safe while you save lives." "Julian, you've already done so much." "I haven't done anything. I'm just investing in what really matters, in good people like you." Christopher came closer to them. "Bro, if you go back to surgery, I can move my base to New York City. That way we'll be closer, and I can help with Lily too." "You would do that?" "David," said Mrs. Catherine, "you saved so many families. Now it's time to let your family save you too." David looked at everyone around him. Each person had a hopeful smile, waiting for his decision. "And if I can't operate like I used to?" "You will," said Julian with certainty, "because you have what most doctors have lost, genuine love for your patients." "Dr. Arthur offered me a job in New York City," David said thoughtfully. "New York City is a good option," agreed Mrs. Catherine, "and Lily would love to see the big city." "That's right, Daddy," exclaimed Lily. "Can I visit the zoo?" David smiled for the first time since they had arrived at the hospital. "Yes, you can, my love. If we go to New York City, you'll get to see everything." "So you're going to be a doctor again?" she asked, hopeful. David took a deep breath and looked around at everyone. "I'll try." The room erupted in celebration. Mrs. Catherine cried with joy. Christopher hugged his brother, Julian smiled proudly, and Lily clapped her hands. "Daddy, I knew you'd make the right choice," said Lily. "How did you know?" "Because you're a hero, and a hero doesn't stop saving people." David kissed his daughter on the forehead. "So let's be a family of heroes." "Let's!" shouted Lily, excited. Julian watched the scene with a warm heart. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was part of something truly important. "David," he said, "can I make one more call?" "Sure." Julian dialed Dr. Arthur's number. "Doctor, it's Julian." "Yes, the one from the plane. I have good news. David has decided to accept your offer. Yes, he's going to start operating again." "Great. And doctor, if you could speed up the paperwork, I'll take care of all the moving costs." "Yes, everything. It's the least I can do." Julian hung up and turned to David. "It's all set. Dr. Arthur is arranging your documents to work in New York City. You can start next week. Julian, I don't know how to thank you. You'll thank me by saving lives. That's the best way to repay me." Mrs. Catherine looked at Julian with maternal affection. "Son, you're an angel too. You showed up in our lives at just the right time. Mrs. Catherine, I'm the one who needs to thank you. You saved me from an empty life." "What do you mean?" Julian told Mrs. Catherine about his broken marriage, about the son he barely knew, about the lonely life he led. "But today, meeting you all, I decided to change. I'm going to pick up my son tomorrow and we'll spend the weekend together." "That's good, son. Family is everything in life." "You're right. David taught me that today." Dr. Gibson entered the room to check Mrs. Catherine's vital signs. "How's our special patient doing?" "Very well, doctor," replied Mrs. Catherine, beaming. "Great. If you keep this up, you'll be discharged on Friday." "Discharged on Friday?" asked David, surprised. "Yes, the surgery was perfect." "Your mother has a strong heart," said Dr. Gibson, smiling. "Just like my son's," said Mrs. Catherine proudly. Dr. Gibson looked at David curiously. "Are you a doctor too?" "I am. A neurosurgeon," David replied shyly. "Really? What a fantastic specialty. Where do you work?" "He's been away," Julian interjected, "but he's going back next week at the Prestige Medical Center in New York City." "Prestige with Dr. Arthur?" asked Dr. Gibson, impressed. "You know him?" "Of course. He's a legend in medicine. You're going to the best possible place." David smiled, feeling his confidence slowly return. "Thank you, Doctor. Don't mention it. And if you need anything here in Miami, count on me." A good doctor always has doors open. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting. Now, continuing. In the following days, Julian stayed in Miami, monitoring Mrs. Catherine's recovery. He had cancelled all his professional commitments to stay close to the family he had adopted as his own. During this time, David and Julian had long conversations about life, purpose, and family. Julian shared his frustrations as a successful but emotionally empty businessman, while David talked about the difficulty of balancing his calling with the fear of leaving Lily an orphan. "Julian, can I ask you something?" said David as they had coffee at the hospital. "Sure. Why were you so tough on the plane? What drove you to act that way?" Julian sighed deeply. "Fear, David. Pure fear." "Fear of what?" "Fear of being poor again. I grew up in a very humble family. My father was a bricklayer and my mother a cleaning lady. During my childhood, I went through a lot of hardship and humiliation." David listened intently. "When I started to prosper in business, I built up armor to protect myself. I thought that if I was tough, if I put myself above others, I'd never go through those humiliations again." "I understand. But you know what happens when you build a very strong armor. It doesn't just protect you from others. It isolates you from everything, including love. And now?" Julian looked at Lily, who was playing with some toys he had bought for her. "Now I want to tear down that armor. I want to learn to love like you do. I want to be a present father, a better man." "You already are, Julian. You've changed so much in just a few days. Thanks to you. You showed me that true wealth isn't in the bank, it's in relationships." On Thursday, the day before Mrs. Catherine's discharge, Julian got a call from his ex-wife. "Cynthia, how's Leo?" "He's excited to see you, Julian. He can't stop talking about the weekend trip." "That's great. Cynthia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think there's still time for me to become a good father?" Cynthia paused for a moment. "Julian, Leo has always wanted a present father. He loves you despite everything. If you've really changed, I'm sure you two will grow closer." "I have changed, Cynthia, truly. I met people who showed me what really matters in life." "I'm glad to hear that. Leo deserves the father he always dreamed of." When Julian hung up, David was watching with a smile. "Good news?" "The best. I'm picking up my son tomorrow." "That's wonderful, Julian. I'm sure you two will get along great." "David, can I tell him about you all? About this life lesson I've learned?" "Of course. It'll be good for him to know his father learned to value the right things." On Friday, the day of Mrs. Catherine's discharge, everyone was excited. She had fully recovered and was radiant to go home. "My son, I can't believe I'll see you back in surgery," she said as David helped her get dressed. "Mom, I can hardly believe it either. A week ago, I never even dreamed of this possibility." "That's because you found people who believe in you," said Mrs. Catherine. "Sometimes we need others to remind us who we really are." Julian walked into the room carrying flowers. "For our dear matriarch," he said, handing the bouquet to Mrs. Catherine. "Thank you, my son. You've been an angel in our lives." "Mrs. Catherine, can I confess something?" "Of course. You remind me a lot of my mother. She passed away 5 years ago and I wasn't even there. I was away on a business trip." Mrs. Catherine held Julian's hand. "Son, your mother knew you loved her. Mothers always know." "I hope so, Mrs. Catherine. I really hope so." Lily approached Julian. "Mr. Julian, Grandma's going to be okay, right?" "Yes, Lily. She's going to live many, many more years." "And are you still going to be our friend?" Julian crouched down to the girl's level. "Lily, you all are my family now. I'll always be here when you need me." "That's great," she exclaimed, hugging Julian. As they were leaving the hospital, Dr. Gibson met them in the lobby. "How's our VIP patient?" "Great, doctor," replied Mrs. Catherine. "Thank you for everything." "It was a pleasure caring for you. And David, best of luck in New York City. If you ever want to come back to the Southeast, we have openings here too." "Thank you, Dr. Gibson. I'll take your offer into consideration." At the airport, it was time for a temporary farewell. Julian would return to New York City to pick up Leo, and organize his new life, while David and his family would head back to their hometown to prepare for the move. "David, thank you for changing my life," said Julian, hugging his friend. "I'm the one who should thank you for changing ours. Without you, Mom wouldn't have been cured and I wouldn't have had the courage to come back. See you next week in New York City." "Absolutely. Dr. Arthur already arranged everything. We're moving on Wednesday." "Perfect. I'll arrange an apartment near the hospital for you." "Julian, you've already done too much." "David, let me take care of you all. It's the first time in my life I'm doing something truly important." Lily ran over to hug Julian. "Mr. Julian, don't forget us. How could I forget the most special girl in the world? And are you going to bring your son to play with me?" "I sure will. You two are going to be great friends." Mrs. Catherine also said goodbye to Julian with a warm hug. "Son, take good care of that kind heart you have, and don't forget to call us." "I won't forget, Mrs. Catherine. You're my mother now in my heart." Christopher stepped closer to say goodbye. "Julian, man, I don't have words to thank you. You saved our family. You guys saved me, Christopher. You showed me there was still hope for me." "See you next week. I'm going to transfer to New York City, too, to be close to my brother." "Perfect, we'll be neighbors." On the flight back to New York City, Julian couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, he felt complete. He had a family that loved him and a purpose in life. When he arrived in New York City, he went straight to pick up Leo. As he rang the doorbell at Cynthia's house, his heart was pounding with anxiety. "Dad!" Leo shouted when he saw him, running into his arms. Julian hugged his son tightly, feeling tears of joy streaming down his face. "Hey, champ, how are you?" "Good. Mom said we're going to spend the weekend together." "Yes, we are, and it'll be the first of many." Cynthia watched the scene from the doorway, smiling. "Julian, you look different." "I am different, Cynthia. I met people who taught me what really matters. That's great. Leo always deserved to have a present father." "Mom, can I go with Dad now?" Leo asked excitedly. "Yes, you can, my love. Have fun." Over the weekend, Julian and Leo did everything they hadn't done during the boys' 10 years of life. They went to the park, to the movies, played video games, talked about school, dreams, life. "Dad, why didn't you ever have time before?" Leo asked on Sunday, while they were eating ice cream. Julian took a deep breath. He decided to be honest with his son. "Son, Dad used to think money was the most important thing in the world. I worked a lot to earn more and more money." "And you don't think that anymore?" "No. Now I know the most important thing is the time we spend with the people we love." Leo smiled. "So you'll have more time for me. All the time in the world, champ. I promise. Dad, can I tell you a secret?" "Sure. I always knew you loved me. Even when you weren't around, I knew." Julian hugged his son, moved. "How did you know?" "Because Mom always said so. And because, even when you were busy, you always called me at night to ask how my day was." Julian realized that, even though he had messed up on so many things, he had gotten it right in showing love, even if in a limited way. "Leo, Dad is going to change. We'll spend much more time together." "Cool. And will I meet the people who changed your life?" "Yes, you will. Next week they're moving to New York City. I'm sure you'll love each other." On Monday, Julian started putting the changes in his life into practice. He delegated more responsibilities to his employees and drastically reduced his workload. He also began preparations to welcome David and his family. He rented a spacious, comfortable apartment near the Prestige Medical Center and arranged everything they might need. "Mr. Julian," his secretary said, "are you sure about these changes at the company?" "Yes, I am, Natalie. I discovered life is much more than work and money." "Can I ask what happened?" "I met people who taught me about what truly matters, and I decided to apply those lessons." "That's great, sir. You seem much happier." On Tuesday, Julian got a call from David. "Julian, how are you?" "Great, buddy. I'm anxious for you guys to arrive. How was the weekend?" "Wonderful. Mom is feeling very well, and Lily can't stop talking about New York City." "And you, nervous about the move?" "A little, but confident. Dr. Arthur called me yesterday and was very kind. He said the team is eager to meet me. I'm sure they'll be impressed with you." Julian, can I thank you once more for everything? David, you don't have to thank me. You've changed my life far more than I've changed yours. See you tomorrow night? I'll be at the airport to pick you up. On Wednesday, Julian arrived at the airport 2 hours before the flight. He was as eager as a kid waiting for Christmas morning. When he saw David, Lily, Mrs. Catherine, and Christopher coming out of arrivals, his heart raced with joy. "Bennett family," he shouted, waving. Lily ran toward him. "Mr. Julian, we made it." "You sure did, sweetheart," said Julian, picking the little girl up. David approached to greet him. "Julian, I've missed you so much. I've been dying to see you too. How was the trip?" "Smooth. Lily didn't stop talking about you the whole flight." Mrs. Catherine also hugged Julian warmly. "Son, how are you?" "Very well, Mrs. Catherine. And you?" "Great. Ready to explore New York City." Christopher was the last to come over. "Julian, man, thanks for picking us up. Don't mention it, you're my family." On the way to the apartment, Lily was amazed by the tall buildings in the city. "Daddy, look how big everything is here." "It sure is, sweetheart. New York City is a very big city." "Mr. Julian, where's the hospital where Daddy will work?" "Right near where you'll live, Lily. Daddy can even walk there." "Cool. And the school?" "That's nearby, too. It's a really good school. You'll love it." When they arrived at the apartment, everyone was impressed. "Julian, what a beautiful place," exclaimed Mrs. Catherine. "I hope you like it. I chose it with your comfort in mind." David looked around, emotional. "Julian, this must cost a fortune." "David, let me take care of you all. You deserve the best." Lily ran through the rooms, exploring her new home. "Daddy, I have a room all to myself." "You do, sweetheart. And look at the view from your window." Lily looked out the window and saw the park across from the building. "Mr. Julian, can I play in the park?" "You sure can. And guess who'll play with you there?" "Who?" "My son Leo. You'll meet him tomorrow." "Awesome. Is he my age?" "He's 10. A little older than you." "Cool. I'll have a big brother." Julian smiled when he heard Lily calling Leo her brother. That was exactly how he wanted them to feel, like one big family. That night, Julian organized a welcome dinner at a special restaurant. During the meal, David made a toast. "Julian, Christopher, the whole family, I want to thank you for this fresh start. A week ago I was lost with no direction. Today I feel reborn." "Bro," said Christopher, "you deserve all the happiness in the world." "David," said Julian, "you gave me the greatest gift I could ever receive. You showed me how to be a better person." Mrs. Catherine raised her glass. "May God bless this family that has come together. May we always stay united and never forget what we've learned together." "Amen," they all agreed. Lily, who was sitting between Julian and David, held both their hands. "Now we're all a family, right?" "We sure are, my love," replied David. "Forever," added Julian. On Thursday, David would have his first day at Prestige Medical Center. He woke up nervous but confident. "Daddy, are you going to save a lot of people today?" asked Lily during breakfast. "Not today, sweetheart. Today is just to see the hospital and meet the other doctors. But soon you will, right?" "Soon, my love." Julian showed up to go with David to the hospital. "Ready for the big day?" "Ready. A little nervous, but ready. It'll all work out. Dr. Arthur is a special person, just like you." At the hospital, Dr. Arthur welcomed David personally. "David, what a joy to have you with us." "Doctor, thank you for the opportunity." "Don't mention it. We're the ones who are thankful. Come on, let me introduce you to the team." During the hospital tour, David was impressed by the structure and technology available. "Doctor, this surgical center is incredible. It's one of the most modern in the country, and you'll have access to everything you need." When he met the neurosurgery team, David immediately felt welcomed. "Everyone, this is Dr. David Bennett," said Dr. Arthur. "I'm sure you'll work very well together." "Dr. David," said Dr. Sarah, the team leader, "we've heard great things about you. We're looking forward to working together." "Thank you, Doctor. I'm looking forward to it too." "Doctor," said Dr. Ryan, another team member, "we heard you have experience with charity surgeries. We have a program here at the hospital and would love your participation. David smiled. It will be a pleasure to participate. At the end of the day, David returned home beaming. How was it, Dad? Asked Lily, running to hug him. It was wonderful, sweetheart. Everyone was very kind to me. I knew it, she said, clapping her hands. Julian arrived shortly after, bringing Leo. David, this is my son, Leo. Hi, Leo. Nice to meet you. Hi, Dr. David. My dad talks about you a lot, and this is Lily, who was dying to meet you. Hi, said Lily shyly. Hi, Lily. Do you want to play at the park? Yes, I do. While the children played at the park, David and Julian talked in the apartment. How was the first day, really? Julian, it was amazing. I felt like I never stopped operating. The passion came back immediately. That's great, my friend. I knew it would be like that. And you? How are you adapting to the new life? Wonderfully. Leo and I are closer than we've ever been. Yesterday he told me he was proud of me. That's beautiful, Julian. You know what moves me most? He wants to be a doctor like you when he grows up. Really? He said he wants to save lives and help people. You've become a role model for him. That night, the two families had dinner together. Lily and Leo were already getting along like real siblings. Leo, said Lily, do you want to see my drawings? Yes, I do. Are you good at drawing? I am. Especially little horses. During dinner, Mrs. Catherine watched the whole scene with a smile on her face. Julian, can I tell you something? Of course, Mrs. Catherine. You found your family. It's beautiful to see. It's true. I've never felt so complete. And you, David? How do you feel? Mom, I feel like I've come back to life. I have dreams, hopes, and purpose again. May God always bless you, said Mrs. Catherine, emotional. A month later, David performed his first surgery since returning. It was a complex case, an 8-year-old boy with a brain tumor. Dr. David, said Dr. Sarah before the surgery, we fully trust you. Thank you, doctor. We're going to save this boy. The surgery lasted 7 hours. Julian waited at the hospital with Lily and Mrs. Catherine. Mr. Julian, is Dad going to save the boy? Asked Lily, worried. He will, my dear. Your dad is the best doctor in the world. When David came out of the surgical center, he was exhausted but beaming. How did it go? Asked Julian, anxious. Perfect. The boy is going to be fine. Lily ran to hug her dad. Dad, you saved the boy. Yes, I did, sweetheart. And you know what else? What? I remembered why I love being a doctor so much. 3 months later, David had already performed dozens of surgeries with total success. His reputation at the hospital grew every day. Julian, in turn, had completely transformed his company, implementing social programs and improving employees' quality of life. Julian, said his secretary, the company's numbers have never been this good. What do you mean? Productivity went up, employees are more motivated, clients are more satisfied. It seems like your personal change reflected on everything. Interesting. It seems that doing good really does pay off. One night during a family dinner, Lily asked a question that moved everyone. Daddy, do you still get sad thinking about Mommy? David stopped eating and looked at his daughter. Yes, I do, my love. I'll always miss her. But you don't have that sad look on your face anymore. That's true. Why do you think that is? Because now you're saving people again. Mommy must be happy in heaven watching that. David couldn't hold back his tears. Sweetheart, how can you be so wise? I learned from you, Daddy. Julian watched the scene, moved by the love between father and daughter. David, Lily's right. Natalie must be very proud of both of you. Mr. Julian, Lily said, Mommy must also be happy because we've become a big family. A big family? Yeah. Now I have you, Leo, Uncle Christopher, Grandma Catherine, Aunt Claire. That's a lot of us. Everyone laughed, recognizing the truth in the girl's observation. That's right, Lily, said Mrs. Catherine. We're a beautiful big family. 6 months after the meeting on the plane, David received an offer to head the neurosurgery department at the hospital. Dr. David, said Dr. Arthur, you're the most respected doctor on the team. I'd like you to take the lead. Doctor, it's an honor, but I have one condition. What is it? I want to expand the free surgery program. There are a lot of people who need help. Perfect. You can count on full support from the administration. Julian, upon hearing about the promotion, organized a celebration party. Everyone, he said during the toast, I want to celebrate not only David's promotion, but the transformation of all of us. What do you mean? He asked Christopher. David started saving lives again. I learned to be a better father and husband. Lily gained a huge family. Leo found his calling. That's true, agreed Cynthia, who had been invited to the party. Julian, you've become a completely different person. Cynthia, can I ask you something in front of everyone? Go ahead. Would you give me a second chance? Not as a husband yet, but as a united family, Cynthia smiled. Julian, we're already being a united family. Leo has never been happier. So how about we start dating again, slowly building a solid foundation? I accept, said Cynthia, as everyone applauded. Leo ran to hug his parents. Dad, Mum, are you going to get back together? We're going to try, champ. But this time the right way, Julian replied. A year later, David and Julian organized a special party. It was to celebrate the anniversary of the day they met on the plane. Everyone, said David, exactly 1 year ago we boarded a flight that changed our lives forever. That's true, agreed Julian. I was an empty man, and you filled me with purpose. Mr. Julian, said Lily, tell the airplane story again. Which part do you want to hear? The part where you were bad, and then became good. Everyone laughed at the girl's innocence. Lily, I wasn't bad. I was lost, corrected Julian. And now? Now I've found myself, thanks to your dad, Doctor. Arthur, who had become a close friend of the family, raised his glass. I want to make a toast to this special family. David, you've saved over 100 lives since you returned. Julian, you've turned your company into an example of social responsibility. You prove that people can change. Dr. Arthur, said David, thank you for believing in me when I no longer believed in myself. David, doctors like you are born once in a generation. The world needs people like you. Mrs. Catherine, now 73 years old and fully recovered, approached Julian. My son, can I tell you something? Of course, Mom Catherine. You know I consider you a real son, right? Julian was moved by her words. Mrs. Catherine, you're my mother from the heart, too. So it's time to stop calling me Mrs. Margaret. Just call me Mom. Julian hugged Mrs. Margaret tightly. Thank you, Mom, for accepting me into your family. You weren't accepted, you were always part of it. It just took you a while to find us. During the party, Leo approached David. Dr. David, can I ask you something? Of course, Leo. How do you manage to save so many people? Leo, I just use the knowledge I've learned. But do you know the most important secret? What? It's doing everything with love. When you operate with love, when you treat patients with love, everything works out. I'm going to be a doctor too, and operate with love. I'm sure you'll be an incredible doctor. Cynthia approached Julian during the party. Julian, can I tell you something? Always. I'm proud of the man you've become. Tommy is lucky to have a father like you. Cynthia, thank you for giving me a second chance. I know it wasn't easy to trust me again. It was worth it. Today we have the family we always dreamed of. And the best part is it includes way more people than we ever imagined. At midnight, as the party was winding down, David and Julian sat on the apartment terrace to talk. Julian, do you believe in fate? After everything we've been through, how could I not? Do you think it was a coincidence we were on the same flight? I think some people are destined to meet, especially when one needs to teach something to the other. Do you think I had something to teach you? Of course, you taught me that it's never too late to change, that love can transform anyone, that hope exists even in the darkest moments. And you taught me that true wealth is in serving others. The two sat in silence for a moment, watching the city lights. David, what do you think we'd be doing today if we hadn't met? I'd probably still be drowning in depression, wasting my gift. And you? I'd be alone, rich but empty, losing my son and living without purpose. Good thing that didn't happen. David, can I tell you a secret? Sure. Sometimes I'm grateful I was so rude to you on that plane. Why? Because if I had been polite, maybe we wouldn't have created such a strong connection. It was my rudeness that revealed who I really was, and it was your kindness that showed who you are. Julian, you have an interesting way of looking at things. I learned that from you, to see the good side of bad situations. 2 years after the meeting on the plane, David was invited to give a lecture at a national medical conference. The theme was Humanizing Medicine. Doctors, David began. 2 years ago, I was away from medicine, lost in pain and fear. Today, I'm here to talk about how a chance encounter changed my perspective on our profession. He told the story of the plane, the humiliation he suffered, and how it led him to reflect on his life. Technical medicine saves lives, but human medicine transforms lives. Not just our patients, but ours too. Dr. David, asked a female doctor in the audience, how do you balance the pressure of saving lives with your personal life? Doctor, it's simple. I include my personal life in my medical mission. My daughter comes with me to the hospital whenever possible. She knows my patients. She cheers for them. That reminds me every day why I do what I do. And fear. How do you deal with the fear of losing a patient? David took a deep breath before answering. Fear is normal and necessary. It keeps us humble and careful, but we can't let it paralyze us. I operate knowing I can make mistakes, but also knowing that if I don't try, I certainly won't save anyone. At the end of the lecture, David received a standing ovation. Many doctors came over to congratulate him, and some said they had been inspired by his story to change their own approaches. Julian, who was in the audience watching, approached him afterward. David, what an incredible lecture. Thank you for coming to support me. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Did you talk about our story? I did, and do you know how the doctors reacted? How? Many said they also need a Julian in their lives to remind them of what really matters. Julian laughed. Well, at least now I'm remembered as a positive example, not the villain of the story. Julian, you were never a villain. You were just a wounded man who had built walls to protect himself. That night during dinner, Lily asked a question that surprised everyone. Daddy, do you remember what it was like before you met Mr. Julian? I do, sweetie. Why do you ask? Because I barely remember. To me, it's like you were always friends. David and Julian looked at each other, moved. It's true, said Julian. To me too, it feels like we've always been part of the same family. Mr. Julian, can I ask you something? Of course, Lily. When I grow up, will you walk me down the aisle if I get married? Julian was speechless for a moment. Sweetheart, it would be the greatest honor of my life. Cool. And Daddy will be on the other side, right? I sure will, my love, said David, emotional. That way we'll make sure we never get separated. 3 years after the meeting, the family had grown even more. Cynthia and Julian had remarried. Christopher had found a special girlfriend. And even Dr. Arthur had become like a grandfather to the children. During Christmas, everyone gathered at the house Julian had bought specifically to accommodate the whole family. Everyone, said Julian during the dinner, I want to propose a special toast this Christmas. What is it? Asked Leo, now 13 years old. A toast to that turbulent flight that changed our lives. Mr. Julian, said Lily, now 10 years old, tell my cousin the story of the plane. She doesn't know it. Which part do you want me to tell? The part where you learned to truly love. Julian looked around the table, seeing all the people he loved. Lily, that part of the story is still happening today. Every day I learn to love a little more. Because of us? Because of you, who taught me that love isn't a feeling we have. It's a choice we make every day. David raised his glass. Julian, thank you for choosing to love us every day. Thank you for teaching me how to make that choice. Mrs. Catherine, now 75 but still full of energy, stood up with difficulty. Can I say something to you kids? Of course, Grandma Catherine, said Leo. I've lived a lot in this life. I've seen many families form and fall apart, but I've never seen a family come together with as much love as ours. Why is ours special, Grandma? Asked Lily. Because you didn't choose each other by blood or convenience. You chose each other out of pure love. And that's the strongest kind of family there is. Grandma Catherine, said Julian, you're right. This family is a gift we received. No, son. This family is a gift you built with your right choices. 5 years after the meeting on the plane, David had become the medical director of the hospital. Julian had expanded his company to other cities, always keeping the social programs as a priority. Leo, now 15, had already decided he wanted to be a neurosurgeon like David. Lily, 12, dreamed of being a teacher to teach children to be good like my daddy. On a Sunday afternoon, the family was gathered at the park where the children used to play. Julian watched David pushing Lily on the swing and remembered that first meeting. David, can I ask you something? Always. Do you regret anything that happened on that flight? David stopped pushing the swing and thought for a moment. You know what? I do regret something. What? Not having answered you back then. Why? Because maybe we would have started talking sooner, and I would have figured out quicker what kind of person you really were. Julian smiled. Or maybe you would have put me in my place, and I would have left the same way I came in. No, Julian, I'm sure your heart was always good. You just needed someone to remind you of that. And you needed someone to remind you of your worth. That's true. Sometimes we need someone else's eyes to see ourselves properly. Lily stopped swinging and walked over to them. What are you two talking about? About that special day on the plane, Julian answered. Oh, I like that story, especially the ending. What's the ending, Lily? Asked David, curious about his daughter's perspective. The ending is that everyone lived happily ever after. David and Julian looked at each other and smiled. That's right, sweetheart. Everyone lived happily ever after. David agreed. And do you know why? Lily continued. Why? They both asked in unison. Because you learned that being good is more important than anything else. That night, during dinner, the whole family was gathered as always. Cynthia served everyone's favorite dish, Mrs. Catherine told stories about when David and Christopher were kids. Leo talked about his plans for the future in medicine. Lily showed off her latest drawings. Everyone, Julian said, I have an announcement to make. What? Christopher asked. I've decided to write a book about our story. Really? David was surprised. Yes, I want to tell the world how a chance encounter can completely transform lives. And what will the title be? Cynthia asked. Julian looked at David and smiled. The flight that changed everything, how love can transform anyone. I like it, Lily said. Can I help? Of course, sweetheart. You can tell the story from your point of view. Cool. I'll write about how my dad started smiling again and how I got a huge family. 10 years after that fateful flight, David and Julian met at the same Miami International Airport. This time, however, they weren't strangers who rubbed each other the wrong way, but best friends traveling together with their families to celebrate Mrs. Catherine's 80th birthday. Julian, can you believe it's been 10 years? David asked as they waited for boarding. It feels like yesterday, and at the same time it feels like we've always been friends. It's amazing how our lives changed. Do you regret anything? Only one thing, David said, smiling. What? Taking so long to fly that day. We should have met much sooner. Julian laughed. David, I wasn't a good person 10 years ago. Maybe if we had met before, I wouldn't have been ready to learn what you had to teach me. That's true, everything happened at the right time. Dad, Mr. Julian, shouted Lily, now 17, running toward them. The flight is delayed. Delayed? Why? Julian asked. Technical issues. We'll have to wait another 2 hours. David and Julian looked at each other and started laughing. You know what? Julian said. Flight delays always bring good things for us. That's true, David agreed. It was during a delay that our lives changed. Who knows? Maybe today we'll also meet someone who needs our help. Could be. Let's keep an eye out. During the wait, they watched the other passengers. There was a young doctor who looked nervous about his first job, an elderly lady traveling alone, a family with financial struggles. David, Julian said, I think we have work to do. I was thinking the same thing. They approached the young doctor first. Excuse me, are you a doctor? Yes, I am. Why? Because of the white coat in your suitcase. Recently graduated. 2 months ago. I'm heading to my first job in Miami. What specialty? Pediatrics. I've always dreamed of taking care of children. David and Julian looked at each other and smiled. Can I tell you a story? David asked. And so, while they waited for the flight, David and Julian told their story to the young doctor, who listened attentively to every word. Doctors, what an incredible story, the young man said at the end. The lesson we learned, said Julian, is that our profession, whatever it may be, should always serve to do good, and that we should never give up on our dreams because of fear, added David. Thanks for the advice. I'll carry that with me for life. What's your name? Julian asked. Caleb. Dr. Caleb Miller. Dr. Caleb, I'm sure you'll be an amazing pediatrician, and if you ever need anything, you can count on us. After helping the young doctor, they approached the elderly woman. Excuse me, ma'am, are you traveling alone? Yes, I am. I'm going to visit my grandson in Miami. I haven't seen him in 5 years. 5 years? Why so long? We didn't have the money for the tickets. I saved up for 2 years to buy them. Julian and David exchanged glances. Ma'am, may I ask where you'll be staying? At a cheap boarding house near the hospital where my grandson works. Hospital? Is he a doctor? Yes, he is. A pediatrician. He's always been my pride and joy. Julian nearly fell out of his chair. What's your grandson's name? Caleb Miller. Why? David started to laugh. Ma'am, you've just shown us that meetings really aren't coincidental, and they told Mrs. Dorothy how they had just met Caleb and how they had decided to help him. What an incredible coincidence, she exclaimed. Mrs. Dorothy, said Julian, how about staying at a nicer hotel? On us. Son, I can't accept that. Yes, you can, ma'am. It's a gift for the grandmother of a future great doctor. When they finally boarded the flight, David and Julian sat side by side, just like on that first meeting. Julian, did you notice what happened today? I did. We met other people who needed help. And do you know why that happened? Why? Because we learned to see. Before I only thought about my own problems. You only thought about your success. Today we see the needs of others. That's true, David. That flight didn't just change our lives. It changed the way we see the world. And now we're passing that vision forward. Just like our kids do too. Leo wants to be a doctor to help people. Lily wants to be a teacher to educate underprivileged children. They learned from us that the meaning of life is in serving. During the flight, David fell asleep. Julian watched his friend and thought about how their lives had changed. He remembered the arrogant man he used to be, the absent father, the neglectful husband. And now he looked at himself. A fulfilled man, a present father, a loving husband, a loyal friend. He remembered David from that first meeting, a broken man, haunted by fear, hiding his pain. And now he saw a renowned doctor, an exemplary father, a man at peace with himself. How is it possible to change so much? Julian thought. And the answer came immediately, through love. It was the love David showed for Lily that made him want to be better. It was the love David had for him, even after the humiliation that transformed him. It was the love of the whole family they built together that kept them growing every day. When the plane landed in Miami, David woke up. Are we there? We're there, my friend. Julian, can I thank you one more time? For what this time? For being rude to me 10 years ago. Julian laughed. Why are you thanking me for that? Because if you'd been polite, maybe we'd have had a shallow conversation and each gone our separate ways. It was your rudeness that created the chance for us to show who we really were. Julian, you have a very special way of seeing things. I learned from you to find the good side of bad situations, and I learned from you to find the human side of tough situations. At the airport, they were greeted by the whole family. Mrs. Catherine, now 80 years old, was radiant. My children, how was the trip? Great, Mum, and we've already started helping others along the way, said Julian. How wonderful. That's exactly how it should be. During the days in Miami, they visited the hospital where David had worked before. Many colleagues remembered him fondly. "Dr. David," exclaimed a nurse. "How I've missed you. How are you?" "Great, Megan. I'm back to operating." "What a joy to hear that. You are sorely missed around here." They also visited the simple house where David had grown up with Christopher and Mrs. Catherine. "Julian," said David, "it was in this house that I learned the values you admire in me." "What do you mean?" "We were very poor, but my mother always said that wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. Mrs. Catherine is truly special. One day she took the only winter coat we had at home and gave it to a neighbor who was freezing. And you went without." "We did. But she said something I've never forgotten. Children, you only go without when you keep things to yourselves. When you share, there's always enough for everyone." Julian was moved by the story. "That's why you always helped others, even when you didn't have much." "Exactly. I learned that a little shared becomes a lot, and a lot hoarded becomes a little." On the last night in Miami, Mrs. Catherine organized a special dinner. The whole family was there, including the new friends they had made. Dr. Caleb, Mrs. Dorothy, and even a few former colleagues of David's. "Everyone," said Mrs. Catherine. "I want to take advantage of us all being together to talk about these past 10 years. "Go ahead, Grandma Catherine," said Leo, now 23 and in his final year of medical school. "When my David first came back from New York City and told me about Julian, I knew something special had happened." "Why, Mom?" asked Christopher. "Because I saw my son smile again. I hadn't seen that light in his eyes in years." "Grandma Catherine," said Lily, now a 17-year-old young woman, "Mr. Julian changed a lot too, didn't he?" "He did, sweetheart. He turned into a completely different person." "Mrs. Catherine," said Julian, "do you think people can really change that much?" "Son, people don't change. They find themselves." "What do you mean?" "You were always the good people you are today. You were just lost, each in your own way." Dr. Caleb, who had grown close to the family during those days, asked a question. "Dr. David, Dr. Julian, what advice would you give to someone who wants to change their life?" David and Julian looked at each other and smiled. "Caleb," said David, "the first step is recognizing that we need to change." "And the second?" asked a former colleague of David's. "The second," said Julian, "is finding people who show us the best we can be." "And the third," added David, "is having the courage to leave fear behind." "But how do you overcome fear?" asked Mrs. Dorothy. "Mrs. Dorothy," said Julian, "you don't overcome fear. You face it. Every day, one choice at a time." "That's true," agreed David. "Even today I'm afraid before every surgery, but I do it anyway, because I know someone needs my help." "Dad," said Lily, "can I tell you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. I always knew you two would get along." "What do you mean?" asked Julian, curious. "Because you both have similar hearts. You just needed to figure that out." David hugged his daughter. "Lily, how did you get so wise?" "I learned by watching you two. You taught me that being good is more important than anything else." On the last day of the trip, David and Julian went alone to visit the grave of Natalie, David's wife. "Dave, do you come here often?" "Yes, I do. I like to tell her how Lily is growing up." "Can I stay here with you for a moment?" "Of course, Julian." Julian approached the headstone. "Natalie, I never met you, but I want to thank you. If you hadn't taught David how to love, he never would have taught me either." David was moved by his friend's words. "Julian, thank you for that." "David, can I tell you something?" "Always." "Sometimes I talk to her too. I thank her for raising such a special man who taught me how to be a real father. Do you think she would approve of our friendship?" "I'm sure of it. She wanted you to be happy, didn't she?" "She did." "Then she's happy seeing that you found a new family that loves you." "That's true, Julian. Natalie always said that family is who you choose to love. And we chose each other." On the flight back to New York City, David reflected. "Julian, have you ever stopped to think about how many people our lives have touched in these 10 years? "What do you mean?" "How many patients were saved because I started operating again? How many families benefited from your company's social programs? How many people were inspired by our story? Julian thought for a moment. You're right, David. That meeting on the plane had a ripple effect that reached hundreds of people. And it's still reaching them. Leo is going to be a doctor. Lily wants to be a teacher. Dr. Caleb was inspired by us to be a more human pediatrician. It's amazing how a single change can create so many other changes. David, do you think there's a greater purpose in all this? I do, Julian. I think we were placed in each other's lives for a reason. To learn and to teach. Our lives are a lesson for other people too. When they arrived in New York City, they were greeted at the airport by the whole family. Cynthia, Leo, Christopher, Claire, and even Dr. Arthur were there. How was the trip? Asked Cynthia. Incredible, replied Julian, and full of special encounters. Encounters? Asked Dr. Arthur, curious. David and Julian told them about Dr. Caleb and Mrs. Dorothy. What a beautiful story, exclaimed Claire. You really have a gift for finding people who need help. It's not a gift, Aunt Claire, said Lily. It's because they learned to see with their hearts. Dr. Arthur approached David and Julian. Boys, can I tell you something? Of course, Doctor. You inspired a lot of people at the hospital. Many doctors changed the way they worked after meeting you. Really? David was surprised. Yes, and do you know why? Why? Because you prove that it's possible to be successful without losing your humanity. That night, at home, Julian was organizing the trip photos when Cynthia came over. Julian, can I ask you a question? Always, love. Are you happy? Julian stopped what he was doing and looked at his wife. Cynthia, I have never been this happy in my life. Really? Don't you miss that old life? The power, the money? Cynthia, I have more power and more money today than I ever did before. What do you mean? I have the power to change lives and the money that really matters, my family's love. Julian, I love you so much. The man you've become is everything I always dreamed of having as a husband and father for our son. Julian hugged Cynthia, feeling immense gratitude for having a second chance with her. Cynthia, thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself. It was David who helped me see that you had the potential to change, she confessed. What do you mean? Remember when you two moved to New York City? I was so afraid to give you another chance. I talked to David and he told me, Lily, Julian has a good heart. He was just lost. Now that he's found himself, he'll be the best husband and father you could ever wish for. Julian was moved to hear that David had stood up for him with Lily. He really believed in me from the start. He did. And he was right. The next day, Julian received a phone call that would once again change the course of his life. Hello, Julian. It's Dr. Arthur. Hi, Doctor. How are you? Julian, I need to talk to you and David urgently. Can you come to the hospital? Of course, Doctor. Did something happen? I can't discuss it over the phone. It's important. Julian called David immediately. David, Dr. Arthur wants to see us urgently at the hospital. Any idea what it might be about? No idea at all. But he sounded serious. An hour later, the two of them were in Dr. Arthur's office. Boys, thank you for coming so quickly, said Dr. Arthur. I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? Asked David. The Ministry of Health is launching a national hospital humanization program. They want to create centers of excellence across the country. Julian and David exchanged glances, intrigued. And where do we fit into this? Asked Julian. You'll be the ambassadors of the program. David as a medical specialist, and you, Julian, as an expert in humanized management. Doctor, that's an honor, but... David began. No buts, Dr. Arthur interrupted. The two of you together represent exactly what the program wants to promote. Technical excellence combined with humanization. What exactly would we have to do? Asked Julian. Travel across the country, train medical teams, implement social responsibility programs in hospitals, share your story to inspire other professionals. David and Julian fell silent, processing the proposal. Doctor, said David, would that mean leaving New York City? Not permanently. You'd keep New York City as your base, but you'd travel 1 week a month, and of course, you could bring your families whenever you like. It's an incredible opportunity, said Julian. Think it over. You don't need to answer now, said Dr. Arthur. Doctor, said David, can I ask a question? Of course. Why us? Dr. Arthur smiled. David, because you've experienced firsthand the transformation we want to promote. You're not just theorists. You're living proof that change is possible. And because your story inspires everyone who hears it, added Dr. Arthur, we've already received dozens of requests from hospitals wanting to learn about the David and Julian method. Method? Asked Julian, surprised. Yes, that's what they call the way you work. Flawless technique with complete humanization. That night, David and Julian talked at length about the proposal. Julian, what do you think? I think it's a unique opportunity to multiply the impact we've had. But would you be willing to leave your company to dedicate yourself to this? David, my company is running perfectly. I can leave it in the hands of my partners and focus on something that truly makes a difference. And your family, would Lily agree? I'll talk to her, but I think she'll support it. She knows how fulfilling this is for me. Julian, can I confess something? Of course. I always dreamed of doing something big for American medicine, but I never imagined I'd have a partner like you. David, you gave me a purpose in life. Now we can give purpose to others too. So, do you accept? I accept. And you? I accept too. A week later, David and Julian were in Washington, D.C., being received by the Secretary of Health. Doctors David and Julian, it's an honor to have you with us, said the Secretary. The honor is ours, Secretary, replied David. I read your story. It's amazing how a chance encounter can generate so much positive impact. Minister, said Julian, we no longer believe in chance encounters. We believe some people are destined to find each other. Perfect. That's exactly the mindset we want to spread across American hospitals. During the meeting, they learned the details of the program. 50 centers of excellence in hospital humanization would be created nationwide. David and Julian would be responsible for training the teams at 25 hospitals. Doctor, David, said the program coordinator, you'll be in charge of the technical and medical training aspects. And me? Asked Julian. You'll be responsible for humanized management and social programs. When do we start? Asked David, excited. Next week. The first hospital is in New Orleans. New Orleans? Julian smiled. That's where we made our first stop together 10 years ago. What an interesting coincidence, said the minister. Minister, said David, we don't believe in coincidences. A week later, David, Julian, and their families were in New Orleans. This time, however, as special guests to implement a program that would change the lives of thousands of people. Daddy, said Lily, now 17, it's thrilling to know you're going to help hospitals all across the country. Yes, it is, sweetheart, and the best part is, we can do this together. Mr. Julian, said Leo, now a medical graduate, can I participate too? Of course, Leo, actually we've already talked about it. You'll be our assistant at some hospitals. Really? Exclaimed Leo, excited. Yes, you represent the new generation of humanized doctors. At the New Orleans hospital, they were welcomed by the entire medical staff. Doctors, said the hospital director, we are very eager to learn from you. Actually, Dr. Lucia, said David, we're also going to learn a lot from you. How so? Each hospital has its own reality, its own challenges. Our job is to adapt our experience to your reality. During the first week in New Orleans, they implemented several changes. Julian created a social responsibility program that integrated the hospital with the local community. David trained the medical staff in humanized care techniques. Dr. David, said a young resident doctor, how do you manage to stay humanized even in the most difficult cases? Dr. Paul, the answer is simple. I remember that behind every case there is a suffering family, just like my own suffered when I lost my wife. And when you get nervous or irritated? I do, I'm human. But I learned that my emotional state cannot interfere with patient care. Julian, in turn, worked with the hospital administration. Mr. Julian, said the administrator, how do we manage to maintain social programs with a limited budget? Mr. Derrick, the key is partnership. We look for local companies to sponsor, create fundraising campaigns, mobilize volunteers. But isn't that a lot of work? Yes, it is, but the result is worth it. You'll see that a more human hospital is also more efficient. By the end of the first week, the results were already visible. "Doctors," said Dr. Lucia, "in just 1 week, our patient satisfaction survey went up by 40%. And the staff are also more motivated," added the administrator. "That's the power of humanization," said David. "When we treat people well, they respond positively." "Dr. David, Dr. Julian," said a nurse, "can I ask a personal question?" "Of course, Marcia. Are you really friends, or is this just professional?" David and Julian laughed. "Marcia," said Julian, "we're more than friends. We're chosen brothers." "That's true," agreed David. "Our friendship was born from a conflict, but it grew in love." "How beautiful this is," said Marcia, moved. In the following months, David and Julian visited hospitals all over the country. Each place presented unique challenges, but the principles always worked: humanized treatment, participatory management, social responsibility. In New York City, they worked with riverbank communities. In Miami, they created a program for underprivileged children. In New Orleans, they implemented a participatory management system. "Julian," said David during a trip to Curitiba, "have you realized we're living our life's purpose?" "I have. I've never felt so professionally fulfilled. And the best part is we're doing it together with our families. David, can I confess something?" "Always." "Sometimes I wake up and can't believe the life I have. 12 years ago I was an empty man, without love, without purpose. And today I have a beautiful family, a job I love, a best friend who's like a brother. Julian, do you know what the greatest gift our friendship has given me?" "What?" "It gave me back my hope. After I lost Natalie, I thought I'd never be happy again. You showed me that happiness can take new forms. And you showed me that being happy isn't about having a lot, but about giving a lot." 2 years after launching the national program, they received an unexpected invitation. "David, Julian," said Dr. Arthur during a video conference, "you've been invited to speak at the World Health Organization." "At the WHO?" David was surprised. "Yes, your program has drawn international attention. They want you to present the American model of hospital humanization." "Doctor, that's incredible," said Julian. "Are you two up for going to Geneva?" "Of course," they answered in unison. "Great. The event is in 2 months. That night, David called Julian, ecstatic. "Julian, can you believe it? We're going to speak to the whole world. David, it's surreal. Who would have thought that 2 Americans who met fighting on a plane would one day speak at the WHO? It's proof that when we do good, good multiplies. And now we can inspire other countries too. David, our story really has no limits. In Geneva, they were received with state honors. The presentation was an absolute success." "Dr. David, Dr. Julian," said the WHO director after the presentation, "you've created a revolutionary model." "Thank you, Director," said David. "But our model isn't revolutionary, it's just human." "Exactly," Julian agreed. "We only reminded people that medicine is about people caring for people. We'd like to propose implementing the American model of humanization in other countries." "It would be an honor," said David. "But we have one condition," Julian added. "What is it?" "We want to train local multipliers. We don't want to export a model. We want to inspire each country to create its own path." "Perfect. That's exactly what we hope to hear." In the following years, the American model was implemented in 12 countries. David and Julian became global references in hospital humanization. But for them, the most important thing remained the local impact. "Julian," said David, during a visit to a hospital in the interior of Bahia, "did you see that child's face when she came out of surgery?" "I did. What a beautiful smile." "She reminded me of Lily at her age, and she reminded me of Leo, too. You know what moves me the most?" "What?" "Knowing that child is alive because we decided to accept Dr. Arthur's proposal. And that she's alive because we once fought on a plane. Our story is truly incredible, Julian. And it's not over yet. 15 years after meeting on the plane, they organized a big celebration. They gathered all the people they'd impacted over those years. "Everyone," said David in front of more than 500 guests. 15 years ago, Julian and I met in the worst possible way. "I was a complete idiot," Julian admitted, drawing laughter from the audience. "But from that terrible meeting, a friendship was born that changed our lives and hopefully yours too. Today we have doctors, nurses, administrators, patients, and family members here. You all are part of our big family." Dr. Arthur stepped onto the stage. "David, Julian, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for teaching us that medicine is love in action." "Doctor," said David, "it's us who thank you for believing in us." Lily, now 22 and a graduate in education, asked to speak. "Everyone, can I tell a secret?" "Go ahead," everyone shouted. "When I was little, I didn't understand why my dad was so sad when my mum died. Now I get it." "What's the secret, Lily?" Julian asked. "The secret is that he never stopped loving my mum. He just learned to love more people." David was moved by his daughter's words. "And Mr. Julian," Lily continued, "taught me that family isn't just who you're born with, it's who chooses to stay." Julian wiped the tears from his eyes. "Lily, thank you for accepting me as family. Mr. Julian, you were always my family. It just took me a while to realize it." Leo, now a doctor working alongside David, also wanted to speak. "Dad, Dr. David, you taught me that being a doctor isn't a profession. It's a mission." "What do you mean, Leo?" David asked. "You showed me that every patient we save is a victory against the world's pain." "That's beautiful, son," said Julian, proud. Cynthia stepped onto the stage to join her husband. "Julian, when we split up 16 years ago, I never imagined you'd one day become the man of my dreams." "Cynthia, let me finish. You didn't change. You found yourself. And I'm proud to be the wife of the most generous man I know." Mrs. Catherine, now 85 but still sharp, asked for help to get on stage. "My sons," she said, her voice emotional, "I've lived through a lot in this life, but nothing makes me prouder than seeing you transform the world through love." "Mother Catherine," said Julian, "thank you for accepting me as your son. Julian, you weren't accepted. You were chosen, by our family and by God." "David," Mrs. Catherine continued, "my son, your wife Natalie must be proud up in heaven seeing the good you do." "Mum, I think about that every day." "And you, Julian, your mother must also be happy seeing the man you've become." Julian cried when he heard Mrs. Catherine mention his mother. "Thank you, Mother Catherine. I miss her every day. She's here with us, son, in the love you've learned to give." Dr. Caleb, the young doctor they'd met at the airport 10 years earlier, and who now ran a large children's hospital, also wanted to speak. "Doctors David and Julian, 10 years ago you changed my life in an airport waiting room." "Caleb, great to see you here, Mao," said David. "Today I run a hospital that treats over 1,000 children a month, and it all started with that conversation." "Dr. Caleb," said Julian, "you prove that a good seed always bears good fruit. And you planted seeds in hundreds of people." At the end of the party, Julian and David were alone on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. "Julian, 15 years later, what's your assessment?" "David, I've had 3 lives, before I met you, after I met you, and now that we've built all this together." "3 lives? The first was one of selfishness and emptiness. The second was one of learning and growth. The third is one of purpose and fulfillment." "And which was the best?" "Definitely the third, because that's when we managed to give back to the world a little of what we've received." "Julian, can I tell you what I'm most proud of?" "What?" "It's not having saved hundreds of lives in my medical career." "No, then what is it?" "It's having saved you on that plane." "David, who saved whom on that plane?" "I think we saved each other." "That's true. You saved me from loneliness, and I saved you from fear. And together we saved a lot of people along the way. 20 years after meeting on the plane, they decided to write a joint book about their experiences." "David, what will the title be?" "How about 2 destinies, 1 purpose?" "I like it. But I have another suggestion. What? The Flight That Changed America. Why that title? Because our story didn't just impact our lives, it impacted the healthcare system and inspired other countries. That's true, Julian. Our simple, turbulent flight sparked a revolution in hospital humanization. The book was released simultaneously in 15 countries and became a worldwide bestseller. During the launch in Brazil, they were interviewed by major media outlets. Dr. David, Dr. Julian, asked a journalist, what's the main lesson you want to convey with this book? That it's never too late to change, David replied. And that a chance encounter can be the start of a great transformation, Julian added. Do you believe your story can inspire others? It already is, David said. We've received thousands of letters from people who changed their lives after learning our story. And what's your message for those going through hard times? The message is that every sad ending can become a happy new beginning, Julian said. You just need the courage to change and people willing to help, David added. 25 years after meeting on the plane, they received the greatest honor of their lives. They were named United Nations Peace Ambassadors. Doctors David and Julian, said the UN Secretary-General during the ceremony, you've proven that world peace starts with individual acts of love. Mr. Secretary, David said, we just did what anyone can do. We chose to love instead of hate. And we showed that it's possible to turn conflict into cooperation, Julian added. During the inauguration speech, David told the whole story from the beginning. 25 years ago, Julian and I were strangers who hated each other. Today, we're brothers working for world peace. If we could achieve this transformation, Julian said, anyone can too. World peace isn't a utopia. It's a choice each of us makes every day. In the audience, their families watched, moved. Lily, now 27 and a director of a school for underprivileged children, cried with pride. Leo, 30 years old and following in David's footsteps in humanized medicine, smiled proudly at the two fathers he had. Cynthia held Julian's hand, remembering how it all started with a terrible fight on a plane. Mrs. Catherine, now 90 and still present at every important occasion, whispered prayers of gratitude. Christopher, who had become a pilot for an international humanitarian organization, watched proudly the brother he had always admired. After the ceremony, there was a reception where hundreds of people greeted them. Doctors David and Julian, said a young African doctor, you inspired the creation of humanized hospitals in my country. How wonderful to hear that, David said. How's the project going? Amazing. We've already saved over 5,000 lives using your model. Doctor, Julian said, you saved those lives. We just shared our experience. You're too humble, the doctor said. But you know you're heroes to us. A European businessman approached. Mr. Julian, I implemented social programs in my company inspired by your story. The results are incredible. What kind of results? Productivity increased, employees are happier, profits grew by 40%. See that, David? Doing good is also good business. It always was, Julian. We just had to discover it. That night at the hotel, the two families had dinner together, as they had done for over 2 decades. Dad, Mr. Julian, said Lily, did you achieve all the dreams you had? Lily, replied David, we achieved dreams we didn't even know we had. What do you mean? When we met, I only dreamed of overcoming my pain. I never imagined I would impact lives all over the world. And I, said Julian, only dreamed of making money. I never imagined I would find purpose and family. But do you still have dreams? Asked Leo. We do, said David. What are they? We want to see you two carrying on our work, said Julian. And we want to meet our grandchildren, added David. Grandchildren? Smiled Lily. It's not time for that yet. No rush, laughed Julian. But when it is, we'll be very present grandparents. I'm sure of that, said Cynthia. You're the best parents I know. Mrs. Catherine, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. Can I tell you a secret? Of course, Grandma Catherine, said Leo. When David and Julian met, I prayed every day for them to become friends. Did you know we would get along? Asked Julian. I did, my son. Good hearts always recognize each other. How are you so sure? Because you both had the same wound, loneliness, and similar wounds healed together. 30 years after meeting on the plane, David and Julian decided to organize one last big project, an international foundation to train humanitarian leaders. Julian, this will be our legacy. I agree, David. We'll train people to carry on our work when we're no longer here. What should we name the foundation? How about the Two Hearts Foundation? Perfect. It represents our friendship and our mission. The Two Hearts Foundation was launched simultaneously in 20 countries. The goal was to train leaders in medicine, education, business, and public service committed to humanitarian values. Doctors David and Julian asked a journalist at the launch, "Why did you choose to train leaders in such different fields?" "Because transforming the world needs to be comprehensive," replied David. Humanized doctors save lives, humanized educators build character, humanized business people create positive social impact, humanized public leaders serve the people, explained Julian. And together, they create a fairer and more loving society, concluded David. In the first year, the foundation trained 500 leaders. By the 5th year, it was 5,000. By the 10th year, 50,000 leaders spread across the world were working based on the values learned from David and Julian. "David," said Julian during a trip to Tokyo where they were inaugurating another foundation center, "can you believe what we've built? Sometimes I wake up and think I'm dreaming. 40 years ago, I was an arrogant businessman and you were a depressed doctor. And today? Today we are grandparents to 12 grandchildren, leaders of a global humanization movement, and still best friends. David, can I confess something? Always. I love you like a brother. I love you too, Julian. You're the brother I chose to have. And we chose well. We chose well." At 70, David still occasionally operated on special cases. Julian, also 70, still ran the foundation's social programs. "Dad," said Lily, now 42 and a mother of 3, "don't you think it's time to slow down?" "Lily," replied David, "as long as we have health and energy, we'll keep doing good." "Sweetheart," said Julian, "our work is our source of energy. But you've already done so much." "And we still have so much to do," said David. Leo, now 45 and medical director of 3 hospitals, supported them both. "Lily, let them work. They're happy this way." "That's true," agreed Cynthia. "Julian has never been as happy as he is now." Mrs. Catherine, who had passed away at the age of 95, left a letter to be read on the 40th anniversary of the 2 friends' meeting. "My dear children, David and Julian." Cynthia read the letter during the celebration. "If you're hearing this letter, it means God has called me home. But don't be sad. I'm happy, because I know I leave the world better than I found it, thanks to the 2 of you." Everyone at the party was crying as Cynthia continued reading. "David, my son, you've always been my pride. Your kindness has lit up the world since you were a child. Keep saving lives and spreading love. Julian, my son of the heart, thank you for accepting to be part of our family. You brought joy to our days and purpose to our lives. And the 2 of you together proved that love can transform anything. Keep being brothers, keep doing good, keep inspiring the world. I will always be with you, in the love you've learned to give, and in the good you do every day. With all my love, Mom Catherine." David and Julian hugged, crying over the loss of the woman who had united them even more as a family. "David, Mrs. Catherine was the mother I never truly had. And she was the blessing of our friendship, Julian." 45 years after their meeting on the plane, when they both turned 75, they decided to take one last trip together to the place where it all began. They boarded at the same New York City airport, on the same flight to Miami, in the same seats as 45 years earlier. "David, do you remember exactly what happened here?" "I remember every word, Julian. I was really awful to you, and I was truly lost, but look what came of it. That became the greatest adventure of our lives." During the flight, they received a surprise. The captain announced over the speaker, "Ladies and gentlemen, We have the honor of having two very special passengers with us, Doctors David and Julian, known worldwide for their humanitarian work that began exactly on this route 45 years ago. The passengers applauded spontaneously. Many came up to greet them and take pictures. "Doctors," said a young physician, "you inspired my career. I work at a hospital in Africa using your method." "What a joy to hear that," said David. "Doctor, you represent the future of humanized medicine," said Julian. "Thank you for existing," she said, moved. When the plane landed in Miami, they were welcomed by the state governor and the city mayor. "Doctors David and Julian, welcome back to the land you helped transform," said the governor. "Governor, it's always a joy to return to the South," replied David. "Do you know that Florida today has the best humanized healthcare system in the country?" "We did know," said Julian, "and we're proud to have contributed to that." During the week in Miami, they visited hospitals, schools, and businesses that had been transformed by their programs. "David, 45 years later, what's the verdict?" "Julian, we've directly saved over 100,000 lives and indirectly impacted millions. And we've created a giant family spread across the world. Do you regret anything?" "Only one thing, David." "What?" "Not having met you sooner." "Julian, if we had met earlier, we might not have been ready to be who we are." "That's true. Everything happened in the right time. In God's time." On the last day in Miami, they visited Mrs. Catherine's grave. "Mum, Catherine," said Julian, placing flowers on the grave. "Thank you for raising the most incredible man I know." "And thank you for accepting me as a son," said David. "She's proud of you," said a voice behind them. They turned and saw Natalie, Mrs. Catherine's daughter, who was a nun and had taken care of her mother in her final years. "Sister Natalie," said David, hugging his sister-in-law. "David, Julian, what a joy to see you. How are you?" "Well, taking care of the needy, just like Mother taught me." "Sister Natalie," said Julian, "you said Mrs. Catherine is proud of us." "Of course she is." Before she passed, she always repeated, "My boys are saving the world with love." "She was truly special," said David, emotional. "And you two are the greatest legacy she left. Not as sons, but as examples of transformation." On the flight back to New York City, David and Julian had one final reflection on their lives. "Julian, if you could change anything in our story, what would it be?" "Absolutely nothing, David. Every mistake I made, every pain I endured, every difficulty I faced, brought me to you and to the life we have today. Even my rudeness on that first flight, especially your rudeness, it revealed who I really was and forced me to change. Julian, can I ask you what your greatest pride is?" "It's having been the father that Leo deserved, the husband that Cynthia dreamed of, and the friend that you needed." "And what is your greatest lesson?" "That love is the only force capable of transforming anything." "That's true. Love turned our anger into friendship, our pain into purpose, our lives into a mission." "And you, David, what's your greatest pride?" "It's having raised Lily to be a good person and having found in you the brother I always wanted." "And your greatest lesson?" "That we are never alone. There's always someone willing to help us, just as there's always someone needing our help." 50 years of friendship later, what advice do we give to the world? "That every conflict can become an opportunity for growth," said David. "And that every person can change no matter how lost they are," finished Julian. "But what's the secret to transformation?" "Love, Julian. It always was and always will be love." 5 years later, when they both turned 80, they organized one last big celebration. They gathered over 5,000 people whose lives they had touched over the 50 years of their friendship. "Everyone," said David, his voice still steady despite his age, "Julian and I want to thank you all for being part of our journey. You taught us that a life is valuable not by what it accumulates, but by what it leaves behind," said Julian. "And you left a lot," someone from the audience shouted. "We sure did," agreed David. "We left behind more humane hospitals, more compassionate leaders, closer families. But mostly," said Julian, "we left behind proof that love always wins." Lily, now 47, and an internationally recognized educator, stepped onto the stage. "Dad, Mr. Julian, on behalf of all the children, grandchildren, and nieces and nephews you gained along the way, thank you for teaching us that family is who we choose to love." Leo, now 50, and running the foundation the two of them created, also spoke. "Dr. David, Dad, you taught me that medicine is love in action. Today I'm proud to carry on your work." Cynthia, now 78 but still elegant, gave the final speech. "Julian, 52 years ago you were a lost man. Today you are the most loved man I know. David, thank you for giving me back my husband." "Cynthia," Julian replied, "thank you for never giving up on me." "David," said Cynthia, "thank you for saving our family." At 85, David and Julian were still working, though at a slower pace. They spent mornings at the foundation, afternoons with family, and evenings writing their memoirs. "Julian, we're writing the 3rd volume of our memoirs." "Yeah, David, our story is really long. What will the title of this one be? How about 50 years later? The love that transformed the world. Perfect, it sums up our journey." "David, can I ask you a serious question?" "Always." "Are you afraid of death?" David thought for a moment before answering. "No, Julian, I'm not afraid." "Why not?" "Because I know our story will live on through the people we've touched." "That's true. We have thousands of spiritual children around the world." "And you? Are you afraid?" "No, I'm not either. My only worry is that one of us might leave before the other." "Julian, if that happens, does the one left behind promise to keep taking care of our families?" "I promise, David." "And you?" "I promise too. And I promise to tell our story to future generations." "I promise that too." 2 years later, at 87 years old, David was diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors gave him 6 months to live. "Julian," David said after receiving the diagnosis, "it's time for us to prepare for goodbye." "David, don't say that. You've overcome so many battles. I won't win this one, my friend, and that's okay." "How can it be okay? Because I've lived a full life, Julian. I saved as many lives as I could, raised a wonderful daughter, had the best friend in the world." "David, I don't know how to live without you." "Yes, you will. You're strong and you have a beautiful family to take care of." "But our duo will never end, Julian. It's just going to change shape." During David's final months of life, Julian never left his friend's side. Together they organized every detail for the foundation's continuation. "Julian, Lily is going to take over the foundation's presidency, and Leo will be the medical director. Are they ready?" "Yes, they are. We raised our children well." "David, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "You were the best gift life ever gave me. Julian, you saved my life on that plane. Not literally, but in a real sense. And you saved my soul." "David, promise me something. Anything. Keep doing good, keep telling our story, keep being the incredible man you've become." "I promise, David. And you promise me something?" "What?" "When you get up there, find your wife Natalie, my mother, and Mrs. Catherine. Tell them how our story ended." "I will tell them, and I'll ask them to watch over you." David passed away peacefully at 87 years old, surrounded by family. Julian held his hand until the very last moment. "Goodbye, my brother," Julian whispered. "Thank you for everything." David's funeral was one of the biggest in New York City's history. Over 10,000 people came to say goodbye to the doctor who had changed their lives. "Everyone," Julian said during the eulogy. "David isn't dead. He just went home. But he left thousands of children here on Earth to continue his work." "Dr. Julian," a journalist asked after the funeral, "how will you go on without Dr. David?" "I'll keep doing what he would do, spreading love and saving lives." "Won't it be hard?" "It will be very hard. But I know he's watching me and rooting for me to stay strong." Julian lived another 5 years after David's passing. They were years of longing, but also of intense work to honor his friend's memory. At 92 years old, Julian began to feel his own time was coming. "Leo, Lily," he called, gathering the children. "It's my turn to meet David." "Dad, don't say that," Leo said, emotional. "Children, don't be sad. I've lived much more than I deserved, and far better than I ever dreamed." "Mr. Julian," Lily said, "thank you for being the best father we could have had." "Lily, thank you for accepting me as your father." "Leo, keep saving lives the way David taught you." "I will, Dad. I promise." "And you too, keep taking care of the foundation. It's our legacy to the world." "We will take care of it," they both promised. Julian passed away at 92 years old, in peace, surrounded by his family. At the funeral, Lily gave the final speech. "Mr. Julian wasn't my biological father, but he was the best father I could have ever had. He and my dad David proved that family is who we choose to love. They met fighting and died loving each other. They turned anger into love, pain into purpose, conflict into cooperation. Today, 55 years after that turbulent flight, the world is a better place because of them. And their story doesn't end here. It lives on through every life they saved, every person they inspired, every heart they touched. Dad David, Mr. Julian, thank you for teaching us that love always wins." 10 years after Julian's passing, the Two Hearts Foundation became the largest humanitarian organization in the world, present in 80 countries. Leo, now 65 years old, ran the medical division. Lily, 62 years old, handled the educational programs. "Lily, do you think they would be proud?" "I'm sure of it, Leo. We managed to multiply their work. Sometimes I feel like they're here, guiding everything." "They are. In the love we learned from them, and in the good we do every day." "Lily, our story has no end, does it?" "No, it doesn't, Leo, because true love is eternal." And so, the story that began with a conflict on a plane turned into a legacy of love that continues to transform the world to this day. David and Julian proved that anyone can change, that any conflict can become an opportunity, and that love truly is the most powerful force in the universe. They passed away, but they left behind a better world. And they left the certainty that, no matter how difficult the situation, there is always hope for those who choose to love. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of transformation and friendship? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most, and whether you believe people can truly change the way David and Julian did. Leave your like if the story touched your heart, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.